Hey guys, tonight we open a tin of something lukewarm, grayish, and vaguely meat adjacent. It doesn't smell like dinner, but it's all you've got, and you're not about to complain, not with a sergeant watching. You're thousands of miles from home, and the enemy is out there somewhere, probably eating the same mystery paste under a different name. Your stomach grumbles, your feet throb inside damp boots, and the sky's gone that silent, eerie shade that always feels like a bad omen. Welcome to the front line of lunch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've barely been in uniform for a month when you're handed your first K ration. It's a small cardboard box, roughly the size of a thick paperback novel. The label's faded and vague: meal, combat, type B. You're not sure what that means, but you open it like it might explode. Inside, a can of processed cheese spread, 2 dry crackers harder than most marriages, 4 caramels wrapped in wax paper, a pack of chewing gum, a powdered drink packet labeled lemon flavored, and a little wooden spoon that looks like it came from a dollhouse. There's also a tiny, folded piece of paper with some instructions and what looks like a morality lecture disguised as a nutrition guide. Oh, and matches. Because, obviously, when eating crackers so dry they draw moisture from your soul, you need something to light your cigarette, or your emergency signal fire. K rations were never meant to delight. Designed in the early 1940s by a physiologist named chalky, they were created for mobility. Light, compact, and shelf-stable. Tasty? Not a priority. You weren't dining, you were refueling, like a very disgruntled vehicle. Each meal came in 3 types: breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and offered just enough calories to keep you upright and slightly resentful. You learn early that processed cheese spread is code for something that's neither cheese nor spreadable. It oozes reluctantly, like it resents your spoon. The crackers are meant to go with it, but they shatter into crumbs that drift into your collar. The caramels are the only part you look forward to, until they melt into a waxy slab during transport, fusing with the gum into a chewy existential crisis. One mainstream fact. K rations were designed to supply around 2,800 calories per day, though soldiers in combat needed up to 4,500. That calorie gap wasn't just inconvenient, it meant fatigue, irritability, and a fierce obsession with anything edible. You begin to dream about potatoes. Not mashed, not fried. Just whole, round, humble potatoes. Maybe still covered in dirt, and here's a strange little tidbit you wouldn't expect: some soldiers use the powdered drink mix, not for drinking, but to clean their weapons. The citric acid in the lemon powder helps strip grime from gun barrels. Multi-use, if you're being generous. Misuse, if you're being honest. You sit on a crate next to another private. He's sprinkling instant coffee powder directly into his mouth and chasing it with a sip from his canteen. Saves time, he shrugs. You nod like that makes sense. Everything out here is slightly absurd. So why shouldn't your coffee taste like bitter sandpaper and despair? The smell of rations is unmistakable. A mix of beef fat, wax paper, damp canvas, and metal. It clings to your fingers and somehow to your uniform, even if you never spilled a drop. You can identify a K ration meal by scent alone, even blindfolded, though that's not a skill you'll be listing on any future resumes. You hear a rumor that someone in another unit got a bar of chocolate in their ration box. Actual chocolate. Not the weirdly powdery Dear Ration survival bar, which was designed to taste only slightly better than tree bark so you wouldn't eat it unless you really had to. That thing was dense enough to crack a tooth and bitter enough to question your life choices. But this rumor says someone got milk chocolate, and it wasn't even an accident. Historians still argue whether the design of these rations did more harm than good. Yes, they were efficient. Yes, they fit easily into a soldier's pack. But low morale, frequent constipation, and the feeling of being force-fed a science experiment weren't exactly ideal side effects. There's something demoralizing about opening your dinner and finding another can of something labeled simply, meat product. You trudge along muddy terrain, stomach heavy from too much salt and not enough nutrition. Some soldiers toss the parts they can't stomach, mostly the meat and beans tin, into ditches or bury them under leaves. Some try to trade, but everyone's got the same box, and nobody's willing to give up their caramels. Every now and then, you come across a mess sergeant with a portable field kitchen. He's stirring a massive pot of something that might be stew, or might be last week's leftovers diluted with rainwater. Either way, the smell is warm and comforting, and you gladly hold out your tin mess tray. He ladles it out with military precision, not an ounce extra. "Eat up, private." He grunts. Fuel for the fight. You chew and wonder if this is the same stuff they feed to tanks. It's not bad. It's not good. It simply is. And out here, that's enough. The canned components of your meals have labels stamped with production dates and plant codes. You start collecting the ones with funny factory numbers, like M42, LOL, as if that somehow makes the food taste better. A guy in your squad turns the cardboard ration boxes into playing cards, drawing suits and faces with a pencil and too much time. The war continues, and you keep eating whatever shows up in your pack. Jam on crackers is as close as you'll get to a gourmet experience out here. You flick the tin open with your knife, careful not to spill. The scent hits you first, sweet, sticky, like childhood. You spread it with reverence. The biscuit crumbles, but the jam clings, defiant and bright red against the beige. You take a bite and hold it in your mouth. For 5 seconds, you are not in a war. You are at a breakfast table somewhere quiet, where nobody's shooting at you and nobody's calling your name, then someone farts. Loudly. The illusion collapses. You choke laugh mid-bite. Later, you'll trade half a caramel for someone's instant coffee powder, and together you'll stir a gritty drink that tastes like regret but wakes you up just enough to function. You'll repack the rest of your rations, stuff them back into your bag, and move on, but for this one jam-covered moment, the war feels far away. You don't know what's coming next, but right now, you're eating something sweet. And that counts for a lot. The first time you see Spam, you think it's a joke. A pink brick of meatish substance glistening inside a tin, wobbling slightly with every movement like it's got thoughts of its own. The label is cheerful, blue and yellow with a retro font that practically shouts, "This is food." But when it slides out with a soft plop and a wet sheen, you're not convinced. You poke it. It doesn't jiggle. It holds. That's either comforting or disturbing, depending on how hungry you are. Spam isn't just meat, it's mythological. It's legend. It's mystery in a can. Made of pork shoulder and ham, ground into a uniform texture and held together with potato starch and sodium nitrite, it was wartime's most controversial culinary MVP. The US shipped over 150 million pounds of the stuff to Allied soldiers across Europe and the Pacific. Some called it the meat that won the war. Others called it things that aren't PG-13. You slice a slab with your pocket knife and fry it over a small fire made from twigs and ration box cardboard. The edges sizzle. The smell is oddly nostalgic, even though you've never had this before. Salty, fatty, and vaguely comforting in a way that makes you question your standards. You take a bite. It's fine. In fact, it's better than fine. It's not beef stew or roast chicken, but it's warm, and it tastes like something. And in the middle of a muddy encampment surrounded by sleepless men and rusted rifles. That counts for a lot. Some soldiers loved Spam. Others hated it with a fiery, passionate intensity. In one British unit, they coined a chant, "Spam, Spam, Spam, bloody Spam. Lovely Spam. Horrible Spam." You don't know which side you're on yet. You just know it fills your stomach. Cigarettes were another staple, sometimes handed out more often than food. There's a ritual to it, peeling back the thin foil, tapping the cigarette against the box, lighting it with a match scrounged from yesterday's rations. You inhale and feel a wave of bitter calm wash over your body. It's not about pleasure. It's about a moment that feels yours. Ration packs almost always include a few sticks, Lucky Strikes, Camels, Chesterfields, tucked in next to chewing gum and toilet paper like they belong together. A weird little family of battlefield comforts. Smoking is less habit than survival skill out here. It's how you wake up, wind down, and mark time when the days blur together, one of the lesser-known quirks of World War II nutrition. Saccharin. The tiny white tablets slipped into every ration pack, tucked inside waxy envelopes with neat little folding instructions. It's artificial sweetener, for your coffee or lemonade drink powder, and it's supposed to lift your spirits. It doesn't. It tastes like wet aluminum and aftershave. But you pretend it's sugar, because pretending is half of staying sane. The instant coffee you mix with your canteen water is muddy and bitter, more like a dare than a beverage. But you drink it anyway, because it gets the job done. Some guys drop both saccharin tablets in at once. Others save them to trade. The caffeine kick is enough to jolt you upright when your eyelids threaten to betray you. There's an odd intimacy in these little rituals, unwrapping crackers while your buddy heats meat stew in a bent mess tin, trading a pack of gum for an extra spoonful of jam. Food becomes currency, comfort, community. You don't remember people's names. But you remember who gave you a square of chocolate when you were near breaking point, and yes, chocolate. The elusive, sacred bar of gold. It's called the Ration bar, and it was technically designed to keep you alive, not make you happy. Developed by the army to be high in energy, resistant to heat, and only marginally palatable, the D-bar fits in your pocket and your nightmares. It's dense, dry, and tastes like candle wax. But in moments of desperation, it becomes divine. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a sweetened version, one with a bit of vanilla or a splash of milk powder. And that's enough to spark actual fights. There's a story going around about a guy in Italy who traded his last cigarette for a chocolate bar and swore he'd never regret it, even as he watched it melt in the sun. Historians still argue whether rations like these gave soldiers what they truly needed. On paper, yes, calories, protein, fat, vitamins. But the soul? That's harder to quantify. How do you measure the longing for a real cup of coffee or the taste of something not canned in a factory months ago? In the Pacific, the rations take on a different edge. It's hotter. More humid. Your Spam doesn't just glisten, it sweats. The crackers go limp from the moisture. You dig through your pack and find a tin of fruit cocktail. And suddenly you're the richest man in the jungle. Cold syrup trickles down your throat and for a moment, the war disappears behind peaches and pears. Out here, insects are constant. Ants love sugar residue. You once left your lemon powder open for 5 minutes and returned to find it crawling with ambition. Even your cigarettes attract moths, though you're not sure why. Maybe they're stressed too. A guy in your squad carves faces into his Spam before cooking it, giving it sad little eyes and a crooked smile. Keeps it from screaming, he says. You laugh harder than you should. Another guy eats his rations with hot sauce he's carried in a flask for 3 months. No one knows where he got it. No one questions it. You eventually learn how to game the system. Heat your beans by placing the tin under the engine block of a Jeep. Add powdered lemonade to lukewarm tea. Crumble crackers into soup to make it feel thicker. Layer peanut butter and jam between crackers and call it dessert. Survival turns into creativity, and hunger into invention. Sometimes, you stumble upon a forgotten box of older rations, vintage stuff, back when they still tried to make things taste decent. You find a tin labeled meat and noodles with a production date from 2 years ago. It's what you have. It's what keeps you moving forward when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Even now, when you think of war, it's not just gunfire and marching. It's the sound of a can opener grinding through metal. The scent of bacon grease on a trench stove. The sight of your reflection in a coffee tin lid. War, for you, is a story told through its rations. You're sitting on an overturned ammo crate that doubles as your dining room chair. Ahead of you, a stove that looks more like a science experiment coughs out thick, acrid smoke. It's your mess tent centerpiece, a portable field kitchen, more commonly known as the Marmite can set up or, if you're feeling fancy, the mobile kitchen trailer. It rattles like it's haunted and smells like every meal it's ever cooked. Today, it's supposed to be stew. It looks like soup. It tastes like heat and mystery. Field kitchens are the military's attempt to convince you that warm food means civilization, even in chaos. The theory is noble. The reality? One cook, one assistant, 30 gallons of something vaguely edible, and about 200 soldiers, all hungry and all too polite, or too afraid, to ask what exactly is floating in their bowls. You shuffle forward in line, balancing your mess kit, trying not to drop the metal spoon that's technically yours but also shared among 4 other guys depending on who grabs it first. The sergeant ladles a portion of steaming beef stew onto your tray. You nod thanks. He grunts. That's the daily ritual. The stew is mostly liquid, with unidentifiable meat chunks and limp carrots that may have been fresh before the war. Somewhere in the mix is a potato, or at least something that once aspired to be one. You scoop it up, blow gently on the surface, and take a bite. It's hot. That's enough. Flavor? You gave up on flavor weeks ago. Now you chase texture, something that bites back, something not mush. It doesn't happen often. You sit near the back of the tent, next to a guy named Miller who's dipping stale bread into his stew with slow, ceremonial movements. He's quiet. Everyone is during mess time. It's like church, solemn, necessary, faintly mysterious. The mess tent is a study in contrasts. The outside world may be chaos, artillery, and ash, but inside there's a semblance of order, folding tables, a dented coffee urn, a stack of tin cups, and a cook who has seen too much and says too little. One mainstream fact: the U.S. Army field kitchen could serve up to 250 men per meal when fully operational, and the equipment was designed to be towed behind jeeps and trucks. It ran on gasoline, heat, and sheer willpower. Soldiers were expected to eat quickly, no more than 10 minutes, often less. Lingering was discouraged. You eat. You move, a quirky detail. Some cooks became local legends, not for culinary excellence, but for creativity. There was the guy in North Africa who flavored everything with condensed milk, including meatloaf. Or the one in Belgium who used hot chocolate powder to spice beans. You wouldn't think cocoa and legumes go together, but hunger makes surprising things tolerable. You finish your stew and wipe your tray with a crust of bread. It's almost clean enough not to rinse. Almost. But hygiene regulations are strict, so you follow the line to the rinse station, 3 metal cans of progressively grimier water where you dip your tray and pretend that second rinse wasn't mostly old grease. You dry your kit with a rag that's been wet since D-Day and return it to your pack. Meal over. Ritual complete. The food may not be good, but it is routine, and routine, out here, is comfort. Now you're marching again. Belly half full, mind half asleep. The sun's rising over a field that's already churned with tank tracks. You wonder what's for dinner. You hate that you wonder. But you do. Because food isn't just nutrition now, it's the mile marker between sanity and despair. Somewhere behind you, the mobile kitchen is being packed up again, stove disassembled, pot sloshing. The cooks will drive ahead, set up at the next rest point, and try again to make beef into something that won't cause a mutiny. They've got powdered eggs, canned tomatoes, and exactly one spice: salt. Maybe pepper, if someone found a crate that fell off a truck, you eat the same things over and over. Stew. Beans. Stew again. Sometimes hash, which is a polite word for meat mush with ambition. Once, during a thunderstorm, you were handed a bowl of noodles that tasted like hope and evaporated joy. You still remember it. The British soldiers down the line are having tea. Always tea. Their mobile kitchens are slightly different, smaller, more compact, but still centered around the eternal kettle. Even when surrounded by rubble, they make tea like it's a religious requirement. You're jealous. Not of the tea, necessarily, but of the ritual, the predictability. Your own drinks usually involve dissolving something in canteen water and trying not to notice the floaters. Historians still debate whether field kitchens genuinely boosted morale or simply delayed collapse. The numbers say they helped. Soldiers who ate warm meals fought better, marched farther, complained less. But those stats don't account for the psychological effect of being handed a plate of liver and onions that looked like regret and tasted like rust. You pass a guy throwing up behind a truck. He mutters something about bad pork. You nod in sympathy and keep walking. There's no time to dwell on food poisoning when the enemy is 30 clicks east. At your next stop, you volunteer for kitchen duty. You don't know why. Maybe you want a break from patrol. Maybe you want to understand how the stew is made. Maybe, just maybe, you want control over something, even if it's just the shape of mashed potatoes. You peel 20 pounds of them before lunch. Your hands go numb. You're rewarded with an extra ladle of beans and a grin from the assistant cook, who turns out to be a former line cook from Cleveland. He tells you stories about burgers and milkshakes, and you almost cry. There's a rhythm to cooking at war. Boil water. Stir powder. Open cans. Empty into pots. Heat. Serve. Repeat. It's not gourmet, but it's work. And work keeps you sane. The best meal you have during your entire deployment comes from a mess tent in the middle of a bombed-out village. It's spaghetti. Not fancy. Not even properly cooked. But there's tomato sauce, real, red, and slightly spicy. There's bread that's only slightly stale. There's music playing from a busted radio. And for 20 minutes, you remember what it means to feel human. That night, you share a cigarette with the cook. He tells you he's going home soon. You don't ask why. Everyone has reasons. Instead, you thank him for the meal. He nods. No words. Just smoke curling into the night, like punctuation on a story that doesn't quite end. Later, lying in your foxhole, you think about that spaghetti. It wasn't perfect. The sauce was too salty. The noodles were soft. But it felt real. And that mattered more than taste. Some nights, the mess tent becomes a theater. Jokes fly. Someone strums a guitar. A guy with a raspy voice recites poetry about bacon and beans. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you need to. You realize that food, in wartime, is never just food. It's memory. It's longing. It's survival wrapped in foil and sarcasm. It's the glue between soldiers. The conversation starter. The complaint everyone shares, even when nothing else makes sense. A corporal gets creative and makes a cake from biscuit crumbs, cocoa powder, and condensed milk. It's gritty. It's lopsided. It's the best thing you've tasted in months. There's a rumor the cooks are getting fresh eggs next week. No one believes it. But everyone hopes. You fall asleep thinking about scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. You're crouched behind a hedgerow in France, trying not to breathe too loudly. Somewhere beyond the trees, enemy shells scream into the earth like punctuation marks written by angry gods. Your rifle is jammed with dirt. Your socks are soaked. And your stomach? It's staging a full-blown rebellion. that last can of pork and beans felt like a bad idea before you even opened it. Too dented, too warm, too gelatinous. But you were hungry, and now you're paying the price. You shift your weight, hoping the gas building inside you isn't about to betray your position. Because here's the quiet, inconvenient truth of warfare: sometimes, your digestive system is your worst enemy. Military strategy rarely makes room for the human gut. Orders say advance by dawn, dig in by dusk, hold this ridge, cross that bridge, never wait until the stew works its way out of the system. But every soldier learns fast: your belly can dictate the battlefield. Food logistics in World War II were monumental. The U.S. Army alone moved millions of pounds of rations across continents, aiming to keep every soldier fueled. But fuel isn't the same as function. The high-fat, high-sodium, low-fiber meals could fill your stomach while emptying your morale. It was common for troops to experience combat constipation for days, followed by the explosive consequences of canned meat gone rogue. You press your hand to your gut, willing it to stay silent. The guy next to you whispers, "You okay?" You nod. You lie. You think about the last proper toilet you saw. It was 3 towns ago and probably booby-trapped. Right now, your best option is a shallow hole and a lot of regret. In North Africa, heat baked the rations into new and terrible forms. Cheese oozed from tins like lava. Chocolate turned to syrup. Everything fermented just a little too fast. Soldiers joked that the real Axis power wasn't Germany or Italy, it was diarrhea. One mainstream fact: General George S. Patton issued orders during the Sicily campaign demanding that commanders report not only on casualties and fuel supplies, but also on the prevalence of dysentery among troops. That's how serious stomach problems were, tracked like bullets and blood, a quirky detail. Some units in the Pacific carried miniature toilets, nicknamed thunderboxes, constructed from crates or ammo cans. These makeshift thrones offered both practicality and a strange sort of dignity. Sitting on a thunderbox with a rifle across your lap, staring at jungle vines, you begin to reflect on life. Or just pray the insects leave you alone long enough to finish. You get used to scanning terrain not just for cover, but for flat spots suitable for squatting. Tall grass becomes your ally. So do ruined barns, abandoned carts, and bombed-out homes with still functioning latrines. You develop preferences. You share tips. That hill over there's got good drainage, someone says. Another nods solemnly, like it's sacred knowledge. Historians still argue whether the digestive woes of troops ever altered the outcome of key battles. But there are credible accounts: whole platoons slowed by cramps, assaults delayed by dehydration, medics overwhelmed not by wounds, but by waves of gastrointestinal trauma. Enemy bullets might miss you. A bad tin of meat? Never does. And then there's the flip side: starvation. The kind that creeps in slow, quiet, insidious. Rations don't always arrive. Trucks break down. Supply lines collapse. You end up with one cracker and a spoonful of powdered milk stretched across 24 hours. Hunger eats away at your focus. You forget where you put your boots. You hallucinate that a rock is a roast chicken. You would trade your rifle for a potato. During the Battle of the Bulge, food became a memory. In sub-zero temperatures, soldiers gnawed frozen rations like ice sculptures shaped like disappointment. Opening a tin required brute force. Eating it meant enduring the pain of cracked lips and numbed tongues. And yet, you kept chewing. Because chewing meant surviving. You remember watching a buddy stir cocoa powder into melted snow and call it Christmas dinner. He toasted with a tin cup. You clinked yours against his. The liquid was barely warm, slightly gritty, and tasted faintly of gun oil. But it was sweet. And for a few seconds, you were human again. Your commanding officer once delayed an advance because too many men were doubled over with stomach cramps. Officially, the reason was poor visibility. Unofficially, It was a bad batch of creamed chipped beef that turned the squad into a chorus of groans. The enemy didn't attack that day. Maybe they were dealing with the same thing. The irony is that the meals designed for high endurance often sabotaged it. Too much salt dehydrates. Too much fat makes you sluggish. Lack of fiber turns your insides into concrete. But the food needed to be shelf-stable, transportable, uniform. It needed to survive the journey. Whether you did was a separate issue. In Italy, you once traded a spare canteen for a boiled egg from a village grandmother. It was the best thing you'd eaten in months. You ate it slowly, reverently. Your body thanked you. For 2 days afterward, your bowels moved like a symphony. You cried tears of joy. You considered writing the egg a letter. Field medics carried medication for all kinds of digestive emergencies. Laxatives. Antidiarrheal tablets. Rehydration salts. If your pack didn't have a first aid kit, it probably had a stash of something to either get things moving, or stop them dead. You learned fast to pay attention to what went into your mouth. Some things never came back out. You discover a hierarchy of acceptable bowel movements. The ideal, alone, at dawn, in a quiet clearing with a soft breeze and privacy. The worst, mid-March, under fire, behind a bush already occupied by a terrified corporal. Everything else falls somewhere in between. A private once created a makeshift rating system for field toilets. 1 star equals trench of shame, 5 stars equals barn with a door and a view. He carved notches into his rifle but to keep score. When asked why, he said, because if I'm gonna suffer, I might as well keep track. There are rumors that elite units got better food. Steak. Real eggs. Fresh bread. You never see these things, but the whispers persist. It's enough to fuel envy and fantasies. You daydream about butter. Actual butter. Soft, yellow, melting on toast, but mostly, it's crackers. Meat spread. Powdered drink. Repeat, the Germans weren't immune either. Their rations included rye bread, canned cheese, dried sausage, and something called ersatz coffee, a bitter, roasted grain drink meant to mimic the real thing. It didn't. Soldiers joked it was made from ground disappointment. On the Eastern Front, Soviet soldiers survived on black bread, salted pork fat, and cabbage soup. When supplies ran thin, they boiled tree bark. Some units resorted to scavenging from the dead, enemy and friend alike. You don't judge. War rewrites every moral. In the Pacific, a Marine once ate a gecko, convinced it was a jungle delicacy. It wasn't. He vomited for 3 days. Still, he said it tasted better than the tuna and cracker pack that gave him food poisoning the week before. You remember that moment in the jungle, hunched over, heaving, praying for it to stop. Sweat running down your back. A medic kneeling beside you with salt tablets and sympathy. Next time, he says, just eat the grass. It's safer. In the end, your body becomes a map of meals. Scars on your stomach from the bad batch of beans. A twitch in your eye from caffeine withdrawal. Teeth dulled from biting into metal lids. Your gut is no longer yours, it belongs to the war now. You reach a new low point one night when you boil your socks to heat a tin of stew. The stew is lukewarm. The socks are ruined. You eat it anyway. Food becomes memory. The good meals haunt you. The bad ones linger longer. And somewhere, beneath the exhaustion, you begin to accept the absurdity. A corporal once said, if Napoleon lost Russia to winter, we'll lose this foxhole to baked beans. You laughed. You both laughed. Then both ran behind a tree, and when the day ends, and the march is done, and the stew is gone, you lie down beside your rifle, hand on your belly, and hope. Not for victory. Not for peace. But for tomorrow's rations to be kind. Or at least, not explosive. You shift on the hard earth, trying to find the one soft patch that might let your spine forgive you. Your stomach gurgles loudly. A nearby voice murmurs, "That better not be another offensive." You smile in the dark, then cough quietly. You're not sick, not exactly. Just worn down. There's a difference. You pull out a packet of dried fruit, raisins and prunes, the army's idea of fiber therapy. The label says for improved digestion, which is a delicate way of saying, this will fix what the beans destroyed. You chew slowly, every bite tasting faintly of dust and preservatives. But it helps. It actually helps. Nearby, a guy hums a lullaby in broken English while rubbing his belly like it owes him rent. You glance over. He grins. "Sing to it," he says, "sometimes it behaves better." The conversation turns, as it always does, to food. What you miss. What you crave. Someone says waffles. Another dreams of a steak, grilled, bleeding, with potatoes drowning in butter. You close your eyes and imagine a diner. Chrome countertops. Smell of bacon. Someone pouring coffee. Someone laughing. You don't need to see their face to know they're safe. Someone else says they'd give their left boot for a pickle. A pickle. Everyone laughs again, because now you all want one. Vinegar and salt, snapping between your teeth. You can practically taste it. There's comfort in shared hunger. Not just for food, but for normalcy. Predictability. A meal that doesn't come. Someone else says they'd give their left boot for a pickle. A pickle. Everyone laughs again, because now you all want one. Vinegar and salt, snapping between your teeth. You can practically taste it. There's comfort in shared hunger. Not just for food, but for normalcy. Predictability. A meal that doesn't come out of a can or arrive with a warning. You fall asleep with your helmet balanced beside you, still faintly warm from serving as your stew bowl. And in your dreams, you walk into your mother's kitchen. The table is set. Bread is warm. Butter melts. No one is shooting. And your stomach is full, but not bloated, not aching. Just full. It won't last. Morning will come. The next tin will be opened. The next march will begin. But for now, for this soft, quiet moment, your body isn't a battleground, it's just a body. Resting. Digesting. Almost peaceful. You wake up to the sound of someone kicking a ration tin across gravel. It clatters in the half-light of dawn, rolling downhill like it's trying to desert. A few muttered curses follow, then laughter. It's a rare kind of morning, no artillery, no shouting, no immediate orders. Just you, your aching legs, and the distant sizzle of something cooking on a mess fire. Your stomach growls, half in anticipation, half in fear. Breakfast during wartime is a lottery. Could be decent, oatmeal, maybe even some eggs if you're very, very lucky. Could also be canned meat hash, which is like someone described breakfast once, and a factory tried to recreate it from memory. You follow the scent to the makeshift chow line. A sergeant with a ladle is scooping out a beige porridge-like substance that smells vaguely of onions and feet. You hold out your tin mess tray and accept your portion with the blank-faced gratitude of someone who knows not to ask questions. This is what breakfast looks like in a war zone: spoonfuls of whatever didn't spoil, coffee made from brown water and powdered bitterness, and a square of stale white bread that doubles as napkin, utensil, and chewing exercise. You eat because it's there. Because hunger always outranks flavor. As you sip your coffee and gnaw at bread that fights back, you remember something an officer once said: an army marches on its stomach. At the time, you thought it was just a metaphor. But now, every mile you trudge, every hill you climb, every ambush you stumble through, it all hinges on whether your gut is cooperating. Military strategists, for all their charts and maps and brilliant tactics, often forget that soldiers are not machines. You don't run on orders alone. You run on calories, hydration, and the sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, today's rations will include something sweet, one mainstream fact. During World War II, the U.S. Quartermaster Corps developed an entire branch solely focused on military food service. The Subsistence Research Laboratory. Located in Chicago, it tested every meal for nutrition, shelf life, and portability. Unfortunately, it never quite cracked the code for palatability, a quirky detail. The British once issued a special ration pack for paratroopers that included tea, sugar, condensed milk, and a tiny collapsible stove, because apparently, even mid-air, there was still time for a proper brew. You envy their dedication, you pack up your gear and fall in with the rest of your unit. The day ahead involves marching, guarding, more marching, and possibly digging. There's always digging. Your feet slide into stiff boots, your back groans under the weight of your pack. And your breakfast begins its slow, grumbly descent into questionable digestion. Lunch comes in the form of a sea ration, a flat, heavy can labeled meat and vegetable stew. You've had this before. It's a chunky sludge of beef bits, carrot cubes, and potato fragments, suspended in a broth the consistency of regret. You heat it by placing it near the engine of a truck, turning it every few minutes like it's a fragile roast. Eventually, steam escapes from the lid, and you call that cooked. You crack open the can with a pocket knife, careful not to lose any of the contents. The last thing you want is to spill food in a place where resupply is uncertain and appetite is a constant companion. The stew slides out in one gelatinous mass before melting slowly into a pool of warmth. You eat it with the same spoon you use for everything: soup, coffee, pudding, defense. There's something meditative about eating from a tin in the middle of nowhere. Birds chirp in distant trees. Someone's singing a tune out of tune. The stew, though offensively bland, is hot. And hot food is hope disguised as sustenance. Then come the crackers. The sea ration crackers are infamous, thick, chalky, unyielding. They snap like branches and taste like a warehouse. But they fill the gaps. You dunk one in stew and pretend it's crusty bread. It's not. But imagination is a form of seasoning. After lunch, you're back on the road. Dust kicks up in clouds. The sun beats down. Sweat glues your shirt to your back. You pass fields littered with the debris of old battles, burnt-out trucks, abandoned helmets, empty ration tins glinting in the grass like dead stars. Every few hours, you're given a salt tablet to suck on, a strange wartime solution to dehydration. Water is scarce, but salt is cheap. The tablet dries your mouth instantly, but you're told it'll keep you from collapsing. You wonder if that's true, or just something the medics say to keep you quiet. By late afternoon, hunger creeps back in. You fish through your pack and find a chocolate bar, a deration. It's dense, bitter, and designed not to melt, which means it's technically edible but emotionally damaging. You break off a piece, chew slowly, and focus on the idea that this is chocolate. Not joy, not pleasure, just chocolate. You eat it for energy. You pretend it helps. Sometimes you find remnants of enemy food supplies, abandoned German hardtack, forgotten tins of sardines, a half bag of dry noodles. It's tempting, but dangerous. You don't know what's spoiled, what's trapped, what's tainted. Still, hunger speaks louder than caution. You pocket the sardines for later. Historians still argue whether the Allied food systems gave them a tactical edge. On paper, yes, U.S. supply lines were vast and well organized. But on the ground, soldiers still bartered, scavenged, and rationed their rations. Morale depended not just on food quantity, but on its ability to remind you of home. That night, dinner comes courtesy of a mess jeep parked near a half-crumbled barn. The menu: fried spam, powdered mashed potatoes, and canned peas. You pile it onto your tray, grateful the peas haven't turned gray yet. You eat sitting on a sandbag, knees bent, balancing your meal on your lap. The spam is greasy but comforting. The potatoes are bland but warm. The peas. You just chew and swallow. Somewhere behind you, someone tells a story about home. A diner in Kansas. The smell of bacon. A jukebox playing Ella Fitzgerald. Everyone listens in silence, eating slowly, chasing the memory of real meals. Later, when the stars come out and the mosquitoes arrive, you lie in your tent, listening to your stomach gurgle. Not in pain, just in response. The way an engine ticks after you turn it off. You made it through another day. You're full. You're tired. And for a moment, you don't feel like a soldier. You just feel like a person. There's a rhythm to this life. Wake, march, eat, wait, eat again, sleep, repeat. Food is the beat you measure everything by. Even in the worst conditions, it remains constant. Even when you lose everything else, your innocence, your optimism, your sense of time, you never forget what you last ate. In a rare quiet moment, your squad mate pulls out a notebook. Inside are sketches of meals from memory: roast beef, apple pie, spaghetti and meatballs. He flips through them like a photo album. You recognize one, a sandwich from a corner shop in New York. I used to eat this every Thursday, he says. Rain or shine. You wonder what meal you'll draw when this is over. If this is over, before sleep, someone passes around a tin of fruit cocktail. You each get one spoonful. Sweet syrup, soft pears, a cherry if you're lucky. It's the closest thing to dessert you've had in weeks. You close your eyes, let it linger, and for that one bite, you are home. Tomorrow there will be more marching, more stew, more mystery meat. But tonight? You tasted fruit. You laughed at a joke. You remembered a sandwich. That's enough. You lean back against your rucksack, letting the cold settle into your shoulders. The stars above are crystal sharp, scattered like salt across the sky. Somewhere far off, a dog barks, confused or defiant. Someone near the truck starts humming again, same tune as last night. No one tells him to stop. Your belly, for once, isn't aching. It's not full, but it's satisfied enough to let you sleep. That's a rare luxury. You let your hand rest lightly over it, like you're guarding a treasure. Someone mutters, "What would you eat right now, if you could have anything?" It's a familiar game. Everyone plays it at least once a week. French toast, one voice says. With cinnamon. And butter. Real butter. Lasagna, another groans. Layers so thick they fight back. Peach cobbler, someone sighs. My mom made it every Sunday. I'd burn my tongue on purpose just to eat it faster. You smile, eyes still closed. Fried chicken, you whisper. Dripping with grease. And a biscuit on the side. A quiet hell yeah follows, and a round of contented sighs swirls through the group like steam rising from a forgotten pot. It's not just about hunger. It's about memory, the smells, the sounds, the rituals of food that told you the world was still safe. That someone had prepared something just for you. Your mess kit clinks softly as you tuck it back into your bag. The spoon rattles against the cup. You pause, listening. No alarms. No shouting. Just a few murmurs, a few snores, and a sky wide enough to hold your dreams. You fall asleep thinking of gravy, thick, brown, peppery gravy poured over mashed potatoes. The kind you never quite got in a can. And you dream in taste. The first thing you notice is the smell, burned oil and wet canvas, layered over something faintly sweet, like syrup that's gone sour. You're in the back of a supply truck this time, rattling through a landscape that looks like it's been gnawed on by giants. The road is more crater than path, and every bump jars your spine like a fist to the ribs. But what really matters is that inside this truck, under a heap of tarpaulin and crates, are rations, not for you, of course. Not yet. These are headed to the front, part of the great logistical ballet that keeps war humming along: supply convoys, quartermasters, depots, and endless manifests of foodstuffs packed in wax paper and tin. You were assigned to help unload for the day. Not glamorous, not dangerous. Just heavy lifting, inventory checks, and the occasional argument over whether a box labeled meat components is actually edible, and yet, there's something sacred about this cargo. Not because it's delicious, God no, but because without it, the whole army would collapse into a crowd of angry, exhausted men gnawing on their boots. The boxes are stacked like bricks. C rations, D rations, K rations, each labeled, sorted, color-coded. You've memorized them by now. K rations come in waxed cardboard boxes and were originally designed as emergency food. They come in 3 variations: breakfast, dinner, and supper. But by now, it's all just shapes and codes to you. You could open one blindfolded, find the cheese spread by touch alone. You help heave a crate marked K ration supper unit down from the pile. It lands with a satisfying thud. One of the guys nearby cracks his knuckles and mutters, "God bless the guy who invented canned spaghetti." You nod, though you know what's inside this particular box: more crackers, some meat spread, and a chocolate disc so dense it could deflect bullets. The K ration wasn't meant for long-term use, but that didn't stop command from issuing it day after day. You hear a corporal say that back in 1942, they thought it would only be used for 3 days at a time. 3 days, he scoffs, biting into a dry cereal bar. Try 3 months. One mainstream fact: the K ration was developed by physiologist and cell keys, yes, the same keys behind the Mediterranean diet decades later. It was intended to deliver 2,800 calories per day in a compact box that could fit in a cargo pocket. It did the job, barely. Quirky detail. The original K rations included 4 cigarettes, a packet of chewing gum, and a collapsible paperboard spoon. The spoon never quite held up. Most guys ended up carving their own from wood, metal scraps, or sheer frustration. You finish your unloading shift and are rewarded with, you guessed it, your very own K ration. Supper unit. You already know what's inside, but the act of opening it is still strangely ceremonial. You peel back the flaps, unfold the wax paper, and lay out the contents like treasure: cheese spread, 4 crackers, canned pork loaf, a bouillon cube, a tin of fruit bar, some lemonade powder, a matchbook, a stick of gum, and the famous 4 cigarettes. You spread it out on your helmet, now flipped upside down to serve as a makeshift table. The pork loaf smells like something your dog once buried in the yard. You eat it anyway. Slowly. Without chewing too hard. You don't want to taste it too clearly, the crackers are more reliable. Hard, but predictable. You smear them with the cheese spread, which has the consistency of paste and the flavor of melted plastic. You chase it down with lemonade made from canteen water and powder. It's gritty. It's warm. It's drinkable. That's enough. Then there's the bouillon cube. You don't have hot water, so you do what most guys do: suck on it. It's salt. Pure, concentrated, tongue-wilting salt. It tastes like the sea had a breakdown. But it fills the gap, as you chew your way through the fruit bar, dried apples, mostly, with something vaguely resembling cinnamon. You reflect on just how many meals you've eaten from a box. Hundreds. Maybe more. And every single one has come with a cigarette and a piece of gum. You light up, leaning against the tire of the supply truck. The smoke curls up into the dusk. The gum, saved for later, sits in your pocket like a secret promise. Historians still argue whether the packaging of these rations, so compact, so uniform, made soldiers feel safer or more replaceable. There's comfort in predictability. But there's also a sense that the entire war is just one long conveyor belt of identical meals, handed to identical men in identical situations. You watch the quartermaster sort crates by unit. He's muttering something about metrics, portions, balance. But you know what the men care about: which boxes have the fruit bars, which ones have the beef hash, and who's willing to trade cigarettes for jam. There's a black market in food. Not a criminal one, exactly, just informal networks of bartering and swapping. One guy collects chocolate bars and trades them for peanut butter. Another only eats the crackers, hoarding cheese spreads for days when morale tanks. There's an art to it. A dance. You once traded a tin of Vienna sausages for a full meal of hash and jam. Best trade of your life. Somewhere in Italy, a man you knew carried a full, unopened breakfast ration for 6 months, just in case. He never ate it. Treated it like a good luck charm. When he was finally wounded and medevaced out, he made the medic promise to give the box to his brother in the next unit over. Tell him to save it, he said, until the war's over. In the Pacific, the rules were different. The heat meant canned goods spoiled faster, insects were everywhere, and hydration was life. Soldiers would boil water for hours just to get something vaguely safe to drink. If a ration went bad, and it did, often, it wasn't a disappointment. It was a health crisis. You hear stories of GIs cracking open tins of stew only to find mold, maggots, or worse. You once opened a box and found it full of ants. Still sealed. They had gotten in somehow. You threw the whole thing into a river and went to bed hungry, and yet, every now and then, someone received a special shipment. A box from home. Cookies. Jerky. Cake sealed in wax paper. The entire platoon would gather like wolves. You all took a piece. You all closed your eyes and tasted something real. Something from the other side of the ocean. Once, a guy from Brooklyn got a care package with bagels. Real, honest-to-God bagels. They were stale by the time they arrived, but no one cared. He sliced them with a bayonet and toasted them over a fire. Breakfast of champions, he said, eyes shining. As night falls, you sit with your mess kit empty, your fingers sticky from canned fruit, your mind full of what-ifs. What if rations had flavor? What if meals were more than just fuel? What if you could eat slowly, really slowly, and not worry about the next order, the next barrage, the next round of shell shock waiting just over the hill? But food in war doesn't offer answers. Only pauses. Someone passes around a packet of powdered coffee. You heat some water in your tin cup, black, bitter, no sugar, and sip slowly. The heat spreads through your hands. For the first time all day, you feel grounded. Then, like clockwork, someone cracks a joke. Something about the stew tasting like sock water. Another groans and says, "At least socks have flavor." And just like that, the circle of men around the fire laughs, not because it's funny, but because it's tradition. Later, when the fire dies and your bedroll feels like a question, you tuck your last piece of gum into your cheek and chew in silence. The sugar is fleeting, the flavor gone in seconds, but the act is what matters. You chew like it's a protest. Like you're reclaiming something from the chaos. And as you close your eyes, belly half full, you imagine opening a fridge. A real one. Light flicks on. Inside, milk. Eggs. A leftover roast. Pickles. And behind it all, something sweet, something cold, you can't quite name it. But you know how it tastes. The rain starts before dawn, fine and cold and constant. It seeps through seams in your tent, runs down your collar, soaks your socks. The mud clings to everything, boots, gear, skin, hope. You trudge through it to the supply line, because the one thing that doesn't pause for weather is hunger. And if the mess truck made it through the night without getting stuck, there's a chance, slim, but real, that breakfast is hot. It isn't. The mess sergeant hands you a tin cup half full of powdered eggs, barely warm, and one of those square gray sausages that tastes more like burlap than pork. Still, it's food, and you're smart enough not to complain when it's steaming. You find a flat stone to sit on, balance your cup on your knee, and eat with your fingers. Your spoon went missing 2 weeks ago and you haven't found a replacement. You tell yourself it makes things feel more authentic. The guy next to you is gnawing on hardtack like it owes him money. His canteen is wedged into the crook of his arm, and he's cradling a soggy map in the other hand. "We're supposed to move out in 2 hours," he says. "Still uphill." "Always uphill." You nod. You take another bite. The eggs are gluey. The sausage is cold already. Still, your stomach grumbles with the determination of something that refuses to give up. As you chew, you remember a training exercise back in the States. They'd handed you a shiny ration, all wrapped up neat, and made you eat it sitting on a sunny hillside while a sergeant lectured about calories and protein and energy density. You remember thinking, this isn't so bad. You wish you could go back and smack your younger self with that can of pork loaf. One mainstream fact: by 1944, the U.S. military had issued more than 105 million ration meals, even though field reports had started pouring in from every front: too salty, too dry, no variety, causes constipation, morale issues. The brass listened. They nodded. And then they kept sending them a quirky detail. One variation of the breakfast ration included a dextrose chewing gum that was so sweet and so hard that soldiers used it as emergency shoe polish. They'd rub it on leather boots to make them shine, then, if desperate, chew it on long patrols. You finish your meal and wipe your hands on your pants. There's no point pretending anymore. Everything is dirty. Everything is damp. And you've accepted that your fingernails will never be clean again. You start marching. By mid-morning, your body is moving on autopilot, left, right, left, your brain mostly occupied by a single thought: what's for lunch? Which, honestly, is absurd. You're crossing fields laced with landmines, under skies heavy with bombers, and your deepest concern is whether today's ration will include a fruit bar or just more crackers. But that's the strange alchemy of war. Hunger makes everything small, urgent, vivid. The war is big. Too big. But lunch? You can plan for that. By noon, you're sitting in a trench that smells like mildew and rust, waiting for someone to shout that it's safe to eat. You pull out a tin labeled chopped ham and eggs. You've had this before. It's wet. It's pink. It doesn't taste like either ham or egg. But it fills the hole. You eat with your fingers again, slowly, methodically. You know better than to scarf anything down. Fast eating equals fast regrets, and with no latrine in sight, you're in no mood to gamble. Someone nearby bites into a chocolate disc and breaks a tooth. He laughs. "Worth it," he says, and keeps chewing. You wonder how many teeth have been sacrificed to the dear ration. Maybe enough to build a new man. A better man. One who can eat these rations without grimacing. Historians still argue whether the morale issues caused by poor food were worth the logistical convenience. One school of thought says that consistent, calorie-dense rations kept units operational and mobile. Another insists that the monotony, the taste, the texture, it wore soldiers down from the inside out. Not all wounds are visible. You believe both are true. Later that afternoon, you catch a break. A convoy driver has a stash of British Army Compo rations and is willing to trade. You hand over a cigarette pack and half your lemonade powder for a tin of meat and vegetables and a biscuit packet that smells suspiciously like actual flour. The British rations are heavier on meat and lighter on crackers. The stew is thicker, more savory. You eat it out of the tin like a raccoon, hunched behind a rock, savoring every bite. For 5 minutes, you feel like a king, then the shells start falling, and you hit the ground with your last bite still in your cheek. Dust kicks up. Men scramble. Orders shout. And just like that, lunch is over. You don't remember the rest of the day. Just flashes, running, digging, reloading, coughing. But you do remember the stew. The warmth of it. The salt. The slow melt of meat on your tongue. And somehow, that's what carries you through until nightfall. Dinner is quieter. Your company has circled up behind a ridge. The mess jeep made it through. The cook is ladling out something that looks like bean soup and smells like despair. You take your portion and sit on your helmet again, watching steam rise into the cold. You stir the soup and think about texture. Every soldier develops strange food cravings. Not for flavor, necessarily, but texture. You miss crunch. You miss crispness. Everything you eat now is either mushy, chewy, or crumbly. You would give anything for an apple. Once, a guy you knew found a raw onion and ate it like a peach. Everyone around him wept for different reasons. You sip the soup. It's thin. But it's hot. You chew a biscuit between sips. It's not good. But it's food. There's a word for this: resigned consumption. When you stop expecting meals to be pleasurable and start viewing them like fuel stops. You don't look forward. You just refill, but every now and then, something cuts through. Tonight, it's a tin of peaches. Actual peaches. Canned, syrupy, yellow and soft. Passed around like contraband, everyone taking one slice, chewing slowly, eyes closed. You almost cry. Not because it's emotional. Because your body remembers what joy tastes like, and that right there, is what food is in war. It's memory. It's survival. It's proof that somewhere out in the world, people still have kitchens and fruit and time. You curl up in your blanket, the peach still lingering on your tongue. You whisper, half to yourself, tomorrow, I hope it's the cheese and crackers again. But with the jam this time. Someone next to you laughs. You and your damn jam. You grin into the dark, not because anything is funny, because it's absurd. The whole war is absurd. Shells the size of milk jugs raining from the sky, friends disappearing between blinks, boots that never dry, and somehow, the greatest debate of your week was over jam. You think about that tiny packet, wrapped in foil, barely a spoonful, strawberry flavored if the label is honest. You once saw a man trade 2 cigarettes and a deck of cards just to get one. I'd kill for jam, someone said. You believed him. It's amazing what scarcity does to value. Back home, jam is just there. On toast. In sandwiches. Forgotten in jars in the fridge until it grows fuzz. Here, it becomes sacred. A symbol. Proof that sweetness still exists. You remember a different day, a different camp, where someone managed to heat a biscuit over a small fire until it was warm. They split it in half, spread jam on both sides, and passed it around. 8 of you took bites. 1 biscuit. 1 packet. You'd bite in, and they were so warm it'd steam up your glasses. You nod, eyes closed. And coffee, you murmur. Hot. Black. Not this powdered stuff. God, yes, he says. Made in a real pot. In a real kitchen. With a real stove. For a minute, the trench becomes a kitchen. The damp earth smells like yeast and cinnamon. The rusted cans in your pack feel like porcelain mugs. You don't move. No one does. You all sit very still, caught in the warmth of a meal you haven't had in years. Then a breeze kicks up. It's cold and sharp and smells like wet canvas. The illusion cracks. You're back in your gear. Back in your boots. Back in the muck, but you're not angry. Because for one whole minute, your mind tasted something clean, and that's the power food has here. It keeps you tethered. To home. To memory. To yourself. You roll onto your side, tuck your hands under your chin, and feel your stomach settle. Not full. But not empty either. Somewhere, jam waits. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But eventually, and when it comes, you'll eat it slowly, you'll savor it, you'll share. The gate slams shut behind you with the dull finality of a steel trap, and suddenly, your world gets a lot smaller. The prisoner of war camp isn't what you imagined, not a dungeon, not quite a cage, but still a place where fences stretch higher than your hope, and the air feels filtered through layers of defeat. You're not alone. A few dozen men shuffle through the compound, hollow-eyed and mud-streaked, but alive. That counts for something. What doesn't count for much anymore? Rations. In the field, you learn to lower your expectations. Here, you're learning to bury them. Because POW food isn't designed for flavor or morale. It's designed for subsistence, just enough to keep your organs awake. Your legs wobbly, and your thoughts focused mostly on your next bite. Breakfast is almost always the same, a tin bowl of watery soup, more warm than hot, flecked with cabbage if you're lucky. Sometimes it's rice. Sometimes barley. On rare occasions, they throw in a crust of bread, hard, gray, and the size of a matchbox. You trade for it with the desperation of someone who used to trade stocks and now calculates calories by the spoonful. Lunch. Thin stew. Usually root vegetables, if they haven't gone soft. Sometimes mystery meat, too stringy to identify and too precious to waste. A few strands in the broth. A silent agreement not to ask where it came from. Dinner varies depending on who's guarding the gate and how generous, or distracted, they are. A boiled potato is cause for celebration. You once saw a man cry over a boiled egg. He didn't eat it right away. Just held it in his palm like it might hatch into freedom. One mainstream fact, the Geneva Convention of 1929 mandated that POWs receive the same rations as the detaining army's own troops. In theory, this meant decent portions and protein. In practice, especially in later years of the war, shortages, malice, and logistical collapse meant prisoners lived on the edge of starvation. You feel it in your bones. Your belt doesn't tighten anymore. Your cheekbones are more visible each week. But it's not the weight loss that scares you, it's the mental wear, the obsession with food that overtakes every conversation. You once loved reading. Now you recite recipes to yourself before sleep, mashed potatoes with butter. Thick gravy. Roast chicken, skin crisp. A salad, not because you liked it, but because you want something green. A soda. Cold. Bubbles biting your tongue, you dream in meals. Not dreams about meals, no, your entire dreams become menus. 7-course dinners stretching endlessly, where you never quite get to taste anything before waking up with your tongue dry and your stomach chewing itself out of boredom. But even here, in the tight belly of captivity, humans adapt. They scavenge. They invent. They cook. Enter the POW pantry. You wouldn't believe it if you didn't live it. Men begin collecting crumbs like they're diamonds. Dried crusts of bread become flour substitutes. Empty tin cans become stoves. Coffee grounds get reused so many times they turn into folklore. One guy figures out how to toast stale bread by holding it over a lantern. He calls it breakfast briquette and offers it in exchange for foot rubs and extra blanket space. Someone else hoards turnip peelings for 2 weeks, then boils them with a pinch of salt and names it camp broth. You all pretend it's delicious. You all finish your cups. There's even one fella who used to be a pastry chef. He turns condensed milk from a Red Cross parcel into something resembling fudge, using heat from a metal bunk frame and sheer, stubborn will. When he shares it, everyone gets one bite. You let yours melt on your tongue like gold. Red Cross parcels are the wild cards. When they arrive, and that's a big if, they carry food items from another world: jam, butter, canned meats, powdered eggs, biscuits. Once, one contained a tin of cocoa. The camp practically held a festival, but they also sparked tension. Not everyone gets one. Some guards intercept them. Others, accidentally, drop them. You hear stories of entire shipments going missing between warehouses and front gates. Historians still argue whether the impact of Red Cross parcels was psychological or nutritional. Truth is, it was both. A parcel could bring 3,000 calories and a reminder that someone still remembered you existed, and inside. Occasionally, heaven, spam, in pristine silver tins. Chocolate, dark and slightly bloomed but still very much chocolate. Crackers that actually cracked. Even the powdered drinks felt like celebration, artificial orange that lit up your water and your brain. Of course, it couldn't last, eventually. You ration the rations. You hide the last cracker. You count out peanut butter by the finger dab. You start saving sugar cubes, not for coffee, but for special occasions. One man uses his to mark Sundays. Another waits until his birthday. You learn to barter. Not just food for food, but food for time, for stories, for news from other compounds. You once traded half a biscuit for 5 minutes alone with a letter. Worth every crumb, you also learn who to avoid, the hoarders, the thieves, the traders who demand too much. In a place where bread means power, even kindness comes with fine print, but there are also moments of real generosity. One night, a guard who used to be a farmer sneaks in a sack of potatoes. No one says anything. No one asks why. You boil them in silence and eat slowly. The man next to you closes his eyes after the first bite and whispers, "God, I forgot how good plain food tastes." That's the strange thing. You forget extravagance first. The sauces. The spices. The fancy cuts. Then you forget variety. You stop dreaming about menus. What lingers longest is basic taste, the salt, the fat, the starch. The way warm food presses back against the cold in your chest. One quirky memory. Someone once made pow pancakes. Using crushed crackers, a few drops of milk, and mashed potato flakes. Fried on a tin lid, served with jam from a smuggled jar. It was awful. It was wonderful. You still think about it. There's no such thing as waste anymore. Orange peel becomes air freshener. Bones are boiled twice, sometimes 3 times. Even the wrapper from a chocolate bar gets folded and kept, for luck, for trade, for something to touch that isn't metal or misery. You sometimes wonder what you'll eat when this is all over. Not the first meal, everyone's got plans for that. You want to know the second, the third. Will you eat slowly? Will you taste things? Will you be able to finish a plate without glancing over your shoulder? You're not sure, because food in captivity isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying you, even now, as you stare down at a bowl of barley so thin it might be soup's ghost. You hold your spoon a certain way. You chew with intention. You share your last biscuit with the guy who gave you half a potato last week. There's pride in that. Defiance, even, because they may control the gates, the guards, the schedule, but not your table, not tonight, and maybe not ever again. Later, when the camp quiets and the guards vanish into the gloom, you sit on the edge of your bunk, running your finger along the seam of an empty tin. The label's long since faded, but you remember what it was: canned peaches. You only got 2 slices, syrup drunk and glistening, but you swore you'd remember the taste forever. You still do. You press the tin against your lips like it might whisper a flavor back to you. But it's cold now. Always cold. Across the room, someone's humming a lullaby under their breath. You don't know the tune, but it carries a rhythm, slow, round, comforting, like stirring soup you'll never get to taste. A few others lie still, eyes open, counting ceiling cracks or memories. No one says goodnight. Not anymore. Not here, you tuck a crust of bread beneath your blanket. Not out of habit, but in case tomorrow forgets you, a mouse scurries across the floor near your bunk. You don't flinch. You haven't flinched at much lately. The mouse pauses near a crumb and darts off again, satisfied. You envy its freedom. You envy its scavenging success. You close your eyes and imagine a table, not a grand one. Just a wooden table in a kitchen that smells of onions and garlic and wood polish. There's bread in the middle. Real bread. Torn, not sliced. Still warm. And someone's reaching over, handing you the biggest piece, without asking why you're so thin. You breathe in, like you can taste it, and then you sleep, not well, but long enough to dream. Tomorrow, there might be potatoes again. You're finally out of the camp. Not because the war's over, but because someone decided your hands were better suited holding a clipboard than a tin spoon. You're back on the move, reassigned to a rear logistics unit stationed somewhere between the front lines and wherever supply decisions are made. Your new uniform is still itchy. Your boots still pinch. But compared to the compound and its cabbage-flavored despair, this feels like reincarnation, and yet. Politics, you hadn't expected politics to be so loud. Not in a war zone. But here in this logistical nerve center, a patchwork of tents, trucks, crates, clipboards, and officers who haven't seen mud in months, every meal is seasoned with suspicion. Every calorie a contest, your job now. Sorting, tracking, and distributing food shipments to active combat units. Sounds straightforward. It is not, because feeding a war isn't just about moving crates. It's about who gets what, when, and how much, and whose palms get greased in the process. And the number of ways people try to game the system? Infinite. It starts small. A lieutenant borrows an extra crate of coffee rations for his men. A sergeant from another unit files a request for emergency flour and somehow ends up with 3 weeks' worth of meat tins instead. You spot these things. You file reports. You're ignored, then come the honeyed dates, literally. A crate arrives from North Africa. Mislabeled as medical supplies. You crack it open expecting bandages and gauze, and find 24 tins of preserved dates in thick syrup, still warm from the desert sun. You're stunned into silence. The scent, fruity, lush, luxurious, floods the tent like an old perfume. Your superior walks in, sees the crate, smiles. "That one's for General Whitmore," he says casually. "Mark it special delivery." You blink. "Sir, it's not on the manifest." He shrugs. "It is now." That's when you understand. Food isn't just fuel here, it's currency, leverage, even seduction. And like any valuable commodity, it attracts deals made in whispers and darkness. One mainstream fact, by 1945, the Allied forces were moving over 24,000 tons of food daily across Europe, enough to feed millions. The logistics of it were mind-bending. Trains, boats, planes, mules, every method available. But how it was distributed? That depended less on strategy and more on personalities, the personalities here. Ruthless, you see it unfold over the course of weeks. A battalion stationed near the Ardennes reports low on protein. Meanwhile, a colonel hosting a visiting diplomat requisitions 6 crates of bacon and powdered eggs, for diplomatic breakfast purposes. You raise the issue. You're told to focus on requisition codes, not ethics. Someone else is quietly building what you start calling a pallet empire. He's got a stash hidden behind stacked crates, fruit cocktail tins, real butter, even a jar of pickles. No one rats him out. Why would they? He trades them like gold. 1 tin of pears equals 3 favors. A spoon of peanut butter gets your truck fueled first. There's an underground menu, unofficial, unspoken, but understood by everyone. Section C mess has biscuits today might mean a shipment was misrouted. You didn't hear it from me, but the 40-second got fresh onions is code for, someone's making deals with the kitchen sergeant. You start to play along. Because you have to. Not because you're greedy, but because sometimes, it's the only way to ensure the frontline guys get their share. You trade favors with the field cooks. You slip an extra jar of powdered cocoa into a medic's bag in exchange for updates on supply conditions at the front, and you lie, just once. A small lie. You fudge a manifest entry to redirect coffee rations to a unit you know has been living off gray hash for weeks. You tell yourself it's for morale. You tell yourself this is what a good soldier does. The problem is, everyone's telling themselves the same thing. And the truth? It's drowning in gravy, quirky detail. In some units, supply officers developed elaborate ranking systems for rations, informal tier lists based on flavor, spoilage rates, and morale impact. Spam was considered acceptable. Corned beef, borderline betrayal. Peach slices were the pinnacle. Some even held tasting competitions, blindfolded. You once watched 3 men debate the best rehydrated powdered egg for over an hour. No one won. Everyone lost. One afternoon, you're called into a tent lined with maps and officers. A supply drop went missing en route to Bastogne. 5 crates, including medical food, high-protein bars, vitamin supplements, and condensed milk for wounded men. You brace for action. A search party. A code red, instead, an officer sighs, waves it off. It probably got rerouted to the 29th, happens all the time. But they don't have casualties, you say. They do now, he mutters, and moves on to a different map. Later, you find one of the missing crates stacked behind a mess tent marked officer dining. Inside, tins of Danish butter cookies and dehydrated soup packets meant for field hospitals. You document it. You take it to your superior. He reads your report and burns it in a coffee can. You're not here to moralize, he says flatly. You're here to facilitate. You walk back to your cot that night with your stomach twisted tighter than a can opener. You lie awake thinking of the POW camp. The powdered soup. The shared bread. The way men learned to make fire with metal bed frames and imagination, and now, you're surrounded by food, and none of it tastes right. Historians still argue whether logistical flexibility in World War II was a strength or a symptom of bureaucratic rot. The answer is yes. It moved mountains. It fed millions. It also fed egos, agendas, and entire side economies inside the war machine. You get your hands on a tin of pineapple one evening. Black market, of course. The label's faded. The lid is dented. But when you open it, slowly, you smile at the note and fold it into your breast pocket. You don't answer the question, because truth is, you didn't pull it off. You just stopped asking permission. Later, you're asked about the missing supply crate from HQ inventory. You shrug. Manifest error, sir. The officer grumbles, makes a note, moves on. He's too busy requesting imported wine for the next meeting with the Canadians, so you keep moving boxes. Keep watching the chessboard shift, crate by crate. But now, you've got a compass, one built on quiet meals, stolen tins, and the knowledge that sometimes the most heroic thing a soldier can do is feed someone who's forgotten what hope tastes like. Your orders come through on a gray morning thick with fog and silence. Reassignment. Again, you're headed to a field kitchen, one of the mobile units that follows the advance like a shadow. You've seen them before, tucked behind tree lines and ruins, puffing steam and potato smoke like little industrial saints. This one, though, is different. It's experimental, they say. Forward culinary support. The new term makes it sound like cuisine will win the war. Your ride drops you off somewhere in Belgium, in a clearing bordered by half-frozen mud and trees with bark flaking like burned paper. The kitchen sits in the middle like a circus tent that forgot the joy, big metal vats, stoves bolted to wheels. Sacks of flour stacked beside crates of powdered milk. The cook greets you with a handshake so greasy it leaves a print on your sleeve. His name's Polanski. He's Polish-American, wiry, perpetually chewing on something that might once have been gum. "Welcome to the best damn restaurant in the Western Front," he says, deadpan. "Tonight's special, beans. Tomorrow, probably beans. The day after. I don't like to make promises." He laughs at his own joke, and you laugh too, because you're too tired not to. You settle in quickly. Your job isn't to cook, not yet. You're on prep. Chopping, lifting, scrubbing. And when the cold gnaws at your fingers like a hungry dog, Polanski teaches you to wrap them in a wet rag. Then place them briefly near the stovepipe. "Wakes em up better than coffee," he says. You start learning the rhythm. Field kitchens feed hundreds, sometimes thousands. They're logistical nightmares wrapped in steam and steel. You wake before dawn, boil coffee before the sun even yawns, and by the time the first jeep shows up with ammo reports, you're knee-deep in reconstituted eggs and chipped beef. But here's the thing, despite the monotony, despite the lack of ingredients, this little kitchen becomes the beating heart of the unit. Soldiers drift toward it like moths, not just for food, but for heat, for smell, for proof that something human still lingers beneath the war paint. One mainstream fact: by late 1944, mobile field kitchens had become standard in Allied operations, often operating just miles behind the front lines. They were tasked not just with nourishment, but with maintaining morale in ways bullets and bandages never could. One quirky detail. Some units had unofficial menu boards painted on the sides of mess trucks, chalk drawings of meals no one could ever actually serve: roast duck, blueberry pie, creamed spinach. A kind of culinary propaganda, reminding men what peace used to taste like. Polanski had one too, except his menu changed daily with real sarcasm. Today's board, boiled hope with a side of burnt regret. Tomorrow's read, cream of not a chance. Still, the food gets better, you don't know how he does it. Polanski starts with the same canned goods, the same dried potatoes and flavorless meat bricks, but he adds something. An onion smuggled in from a French widow's garden. A pinch of real salt saved from someone's care package. Bits and pieces, traded, begged, scrounged. One morning, you catch him grating chocolate into the coffee. "For the boys," he says. "It's their birthday today." You don't ask whose birthday. It doesn't matter. Then one day, a new arrival changes everything. A supply truck rolls in carrying something rare, fresh meat. Real beef. Slaughtered that morning by a local farmer and bartered for who knows what. Polanski's eyes light up. "Stew night," he says. You ever made beef stew in a landmine zone? You help peel 50 potatoes, eyes watering not from the fumes but from something deeper, some old memory of Sunday dinners and laughter and a mother who whistled off-key while cooking. You peel, and you stir, and you taste, and suddenly this kitchen becomes a temple. That night, men eat slowly. They close their eyes with each bite. The stew is thick, rich, real. You watch a corporal sip the broth and whisper, "I haven't tasted anything this good since '39. Someone else cries. Just one tear, sliding past soot and fatigue, and then, the most dangerous sound of all, silence. No chewing, no clatter. Just reverence. As if for 5 minutes, everyone agrees that food is holy. You keep the leftovers warm. A few stragglers come by hours later, cold and shaking. You give them bowls. No questions asked. Polanski hands you a mug of soup and says, "This is how we win, kid. Not with tanks. With this." He's joking, mostly. But not entirely. Historians still argue whether feeding soldiers well had measurable impact on combat effectiveness. One camp insists morale and nutrition are inseparable. Another claims victory depended on fuel, steel, and intel, not the warmth of a stew. You believe both, because you've seen what a hot meal can do to a man who's forgotten how to smile. Of course, it doesn't last. 2 weeks later, the truck carrying the flour shipment is hit by shellfire. You find biscuit powder scattered across the road, mixing with mud. A tin of cocoa explodes like confetti across a ditch. No one dies, but the kitchen weeps, back to tins. Back to powdered soup and crackers that snap like floor tiles, but now, something's different. Polanski begins experimenting. He uses less water. Lets the biscuits soak longer. Toasts the spam until it crisps. Adds burnt bits of garlic for texture. A splash of vinegar found in a German cellar. You help. You learn. You start treating every meal like a puzzle. How to make soup feel like stew. How to make breakfast feel like home. Someone calls you chef. You laugh. You've never boiled an egg before the war. One night, a guy from Brooklyn offers you a family recipe for tomato gravy. You don't have tomatoes, or meat, or time. But you try anyway. You mix ketchup, sugar, salt, and water. You simmer it low. You serve it over rice. It's terrible. He cries anyway. Tastes just like it, he says. Sometimes taste doesn't matter. One evening, the general himself shows up. He doesn't eat with the men, of course. He gets a private meal. But Polanski makes him the same stew you served yesterday, down to the last boiled carrot. Afterward, the general walks past your station, chewing thoughtfully. No onion? He says. You blink. No, sir. He nods. Still. Not bad. Then he leaves. The next day, you receive a box. No label, no note. Inside, onions. Fresh. Dozens. You and Polanski dance in the mud. You and Polanski dance in the mud, holding an onion in each hand like trophies. The steam from the stoves billows behind you like some ancient altar. And for a second, just one shining, fragrant second, you feel victorious. Not in the military sense. Not like flags and medals. But in the sense that something good made it through. You don't waste the onions. Polanski doles them out like gold, one for soup, one for the meat hash, one he peels with the precision of a jeweler and roasts slowly, adding slivers to a gravy no one will recognize but everyone will feel. He even saves the skins, for broth, for color, for luck, and that night's meal, transcendent. Soldiers sit longer at the tables. Some eat with their eyes closed. One even kisses his spoon. I swear, says a private from Minnesota, this tastes like my grandma's pot roast. And she never even left the farm. Polanski winks. Told you. Onions change everything. You nod, chewing slowly. The stew does taste different, rounder, deeper. Like the memory of better days, boiled down to broth. From then on, food becomes ritual. You and Polanski start naming your dishes again, not sarcastic titles anymore, but real ones. Midnight stew. 3-day soup. Winter rice. The men start referring to meals by name, as if they're friends they look forward to seeing again. Someone even makes a sign for the mess tent, the iron ladle. It hangs crooked and hand-painted, but it feels like a home. You begin to notice things. The way the line quiets down before dinner is served. The way even the loudmouths get solemn when the trays come out. The way men lean in when they smell garlic. The food doesn't just feed bodies now. It anchors time, it gives shape to the endlessness. Every ladleful reminds someone where they came from. Every bowl passed down the line says, you made it another day. And out here, that's everything. Your boots squelch through the sucking mud as you stumble toward another shallow trench that's barely worthy of the word. The rain has turned everything into soup, gray, tasteless, bottomless soup. You've traded the relative warmth of a rear kitchen for the damp dread of the front again. You didn't ask for this transfer. Nobody ever does. But now you're here, back among the unwashed, the unshaven, and the unspeakably hungry. You drop into the trench just as a mortar booms in the distance. No one flinches. Everyone's too tired for flinching. You look around and see faces barely lit by the faintest glow of dusk. They're not quite ghosts yet, but the resemblance is getting eerie. Sunken cheeks, cracked lips, eyes too wide and too used to bad news. One man is eating something from a tin using a spent bullet as a spoon. You ask what it is. Does it matter? He says, chewing slowly. You shake your head. He's right, trench food isn't really food. It's an apology. It's the army saying, this is all we had room for. Tins dented from the trip over. Labels half worn by rain. Mystery meats that never quite uncoil from their gelatin. Crackers so dry they squeak when you chew them. One mainstream fact, the term trench mouth wasn't just a grim joke, it was an actual diagnosis. Acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. Caused by poor hygiene, stress, and a diet lacking in fresh vegetables and vitamins. Gums bled. Teeth loosened. Breath turned foul enough to make even the rats flinch. So what did the men eat? Spam. So much spam. You'd think the war was being fought for spam, also corned beef, called bully beef in the British ranks. Sardines. Hardtack that could chip a molar. Powdered soups, often gray and tasteless but hot, which was sometimes enough. Occasionally, there was canned fruit, though it was more rumor than ration. You unwrap a biscuit from its waxed paper. It's the size of a pack of cigarettes and about as appetizing. You dip it into lukewarm beef broth and hope it softens enough to swallow without bleeding. A fellow in the next trench section grins at you with half his teeth. Trick is to soak it in tea first, he says. Course, you've got to have tea. You don't. You do have a tin of meat hash that smells vaguely like dog food. And some greenish crackers that break into dust when you touch them. You scoop the hash with a crust and chew slowly. The flavor isn't bad. It's just faint. Like the ghost of beef passed through it on the way somewhere else. That's trench food. Hauntingly familiar, but never quite present. Someone down the line is trying to cook something over a candle flame. You crawl closer and see it's a mess tin with baked beans. Not American style with sugar, no, these are British Army beans, bland and starchy. But the heat makes them special. You watch the cook, more accurately, the hopeful warmer, adjust the angle of his tin like he's aligning a telescope. There's reverence in it, hot beans. He mutters, half to himself. Can't die if you've got hot beans. Historians still argue whether field rations were a triumph of logistics or an international crime against taste. Some say soldiers appreciated the consistency and portability. Others point to letters home, full of longing for butter, eggs, bread that wasn't gray. There are even testimonies from men who swore they'd rather face a German patrol than another can of mutton stew. You don't blame them. You shift your position, trying to find a dry patch in a trench built entirely out of wet. Your socks are soaked. You haven't felt your toes in days. You bite into a chocolate bar from a ration pack, a deer ration, hard as a rock, bitter as betrayal. Developed by the U.S. Army to be heat-resistant and non-tempting, it tastes like unsweetened punishment. But it has calories, so you eat it anyway. Nearby, a soldier is picking at a rash along his gum line. He's been avoiding the salted meat for days, but there's nothing else. He chews with one side of his mouth, wincing, then spits into the mud. You hear the rumor. Someone says, new ration packs coming soon. With real cheese. Everyone laughs. The kind of laugh that's hollow and hungry. Cheese. Another says, we haven't even seen a cow since October. Someone else chimes in, I'll believe it when I taste it. That's the problem with trench rumors, they're edible, too. You devour the hope before logic can catch up, a quirky fact. In the muddiest months, some units used their empty food tins to bail out water from their trenches. Others flattened them into makeshift shovels or used them as stoves by packing them with solid fuel tablets. In one infamous case, a squad used sardine tins as signal mirrors to blind a sniper. It didn't work. The sniper adjusted. Dinner arrives in the form of a small handcart dragged by 2 supply runners. It contains a single pot of stew, and by stew, they mean warm, lumpy water with a few things floating in it. Carrots. Potato skin. Possibly a bean. The cook ladles it into helmets and mugs. You get half a cup, it's hot. That's enough, no one complains. Complaints take energy. And energy takes calories you don't have. Still, you talk about food constantly. The conversations are vivid, sacred. You'd think you were all 5-star chefs in another life. Someone describes a Christmas roast in minute detail. Another recalls a German bakery from before the war. The apple strudel was so flaky, it had layers like paper. Real butter. I still dream about it. You chew your stew and close your eyes. You imagine butter. You imagine toast. You imagine anything that isn't soaked, salted, or scraped from a tin. That night, a guy you barely know shares a piece of hard candy he's been saving for a month. He breaks it in half with a rock and gives you the larger piece. It tastes like cherry, or maybe just memory. It dissolves slowly in your mouth, and for 5 whole minutes, you don't think about your feet, your teeth, or your future, just sugar. You thank him. He shrugs. We're all just trying to survive our mouths, he says. Later, lying in a foxhole dug just deep enough to fool the wind, you suck on the last fragment of that candy and whisper a prayer to whoever made it. Not a saint's prayer. A cook's prayer. A hungry man's prayer. Let tomorrow bring something soft. Something warm. Something chewable. You don't ask for much, just a meal you don't have to fight with, just a meal you don't have to fight with. That's the dream now, not hot dogs or milkshakes, not roast duck or risotto. Just something that doesn't bite back when you try to eat it. Something soft enough that it doesn't feel like a dental exam. Something with flavor that doesn't taste like regret. In the trench next to yours, someone's fiddling with a stove made from an old ammunition tin and bits of wire. You watch him feed it a crushed fuel tablet and balance a mess tin on top with theatrical care. He pulls a packet of powdered soup from his coat pocket, one of the British ones. Printed in large block letters, soup, PEA, and ham flavor. Note the flavor, not flavor. It's a promise, not a guarantee. He empties the powder into the tin and adds water from his canteen. The flame stutters, flares, and the mixture begins to bubble. You edge closer. Is that real ham? He snorts. If it is, it was a ham that died of loneliness. Still, the smell is promising. Warm. Salty. Almost like something you might have ordered in a cafeteria, long before this whole trench-shaped lifestyle. He stirs carefully, then fishes out a spoon from his boot, washed, presumably. You hope, want a sip. He asks, you hesitate, then nod. One sip. The kind of sip that reminds you how long it's been since you tasted anything that didn't come from a can or your own imagination. It's actually decent. You hand it back to him, more grateful than you let on. Tastes like something my uncle used to make, you say. Your uncle boiled socks too. You both laugh. Genuinely this time, the wind picks up. Somewhere along the line, a soldier is singing under his breath, off-key, but soft and steady. You don't recognize the tune, but it wraps around the trench like a blanket someone forgot to issue. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and lean back against the wall of the earth, full on a third of a cup of soup and one tiny spoonful of someone else's kindness. Somehow, it's enough. You're no longer in the trench, not exactly. Your unit's rotated back behind the lines for recovery, though what that means depends entirely on who's issuing the orders. For some, it's a week of sleep on actual bunks. For others, it's 3 days of hauling crates and peeling potatoes with fingers still cracked from frostbite. For you, it means being temporarily assigned to a field depot tucked behind a half-destroyed train station in France. The good news, you're not being shot at. The bad news, you're surrounded by so many boxes of mystery tins that your dreams now come with expiration dates. This place is where food is sorted, mislabeled, moved, and sometimes, very occasionally, eaten. You're one of a dozen soldiers assigned to unpack and catalog the latest shipment. Most of it comes in battered wooden crates labeled with cryptic codes, S-245, PRTNS, beef, chopped, 1942, or just do not open, special. You open it anyway, inside. Sardines. Always sardines, they've become a kind of running joke. No matter what you're looking for, powdered milk, canned fruit, medical cocoa, you'll find sardines. You joke that if the war ever ends, you'll open a sardine museum. You'll call it From the Front to the Fork. Your friends nod. No one laughs. They're too tired. The thing is, food here is in flux. You're in this strange purgatory between the muddy trenches and the warm kitchens back home, where meals come with sides and sauces and seconds. Here, it's all scavenged, repurposed, and occasionally dropped by plane like some divine misunderstanding. One day, a parachute gets tangled in a tree near the depot. A crate dangles awkwardly, bobbing in the wind. You're part of the team sent to retrieve it. You pull it down carefully, reverently, like it might contain treasure. When you pry open the top, every head leans in. The crate contains citrus, oranges. Real, actual oranges. Dozens of them. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a private mutters, "They're glowing." He's not wrong. Compared to the dull browns and grays of army fare, the oranges look like suns, soft, ripe, absurd. You can smell them from several feet away. Sweet, clean, alive, you expect chaos. You expect a feeding frenzy. But no. The men do something strange. They line up, someone hands out a knife. 1 orange per man. You get yours and just hold it for a while. It's warm from the sun, smooth in your palm. You press it to your face. It smells like summer and childhood and hope. You peel it slowly. Reverently, the juice runs down your fingers. You lick it. It's perfect. Tart, sweet, wild. It hurts to eat, in the best way, your taste buds protesting from months of mediocrity. Someone cries. You understand why. One mainstream fact: in some sectors, the military began flying in vitamin-rich foods as morale boosters, citrus, eggs, even small amounts of fresh meat. It wasn't regular. It wasn't reliable. But when it happened, it felt like a miracle. That night, nobody talks about the war. They talk about meals. Big ones. Fancy ones. Silly ones. My ma used to make these cabbage rolls, someone says. Filled with rice, beef, tomato sauce, not from a can. Real tomato. You could smell them from the end of the block. Another chimes in, I miss pancakes. The big kind. Not those weird army flapjacks. Real ones. Buttery. Stack of 5. Syrup so thick it drips like lava. The cook adds, my dad grilled steaks every Friday. Burnt the edges every time. I hated it. Now I'd eat his shoe if he cooked it. You listen. You nod. And in your mind, you start building a menu for the first day of peace. It starts with toast. The next morning, you're assigned to the ration testing station, a polite term for open the tin, smell it, and pray it doesn't kill anyone. You work beside a man who claims to have eaten a can of 1939 corned beef and survived. He looks pale. Possibly unrelated, you learn fast. Cans with bulging lids are bad. Cans that hiss are worse. And anything marked experimental is to be buried. You find one labeled chicken loaf, cream that looks, and smells, like sadness. You toss it immediately. Your job gets weirder when you start getting feedback reports. Soldiers rate their meals now. Not formally, but you hear the gossip, mess tent C. Foods like chewing sandbags. D Company swears they got real mashed potatoes last week. Real. Not flakes. There's a quiet war happening beneath the real one. A war of meals. A war of envy, quirky tidbit. In Italy, some US units bartered cigarettes for fresh pasta from local civilians. The pasta was boiled in helmet pots and eaten with powdered cheese packets. One man said it tasted like victory. You wonder what victory will taste like for you. Later that week, a crate arrives mismarked as medical priority. Inside, candy bars. Hundreds of them. The good kind, real chocolate, caramel, nougat. You haven't seen anything like it since basic. The officers hoard a few. Naturally. But they allow the rest to be distributed, one per soldier. You don't eat yours, you unwrap it. You smell it. You stare at it. And then, after everyone else has fallen asleep, you take a single bite, and for 15 seconds, you forget where you are. Historians still argue whether food quality or quantity mattered more during the war. Some say survival is about calories. Others insist that morale hinges on taste. You know the truth, it's both. A man with enough calories can live. A man with good food might actually want to. The next day, your squad is ordered to burn spoiled rations. It's a funeral, really. Tins of meat that smell like despair. Bags of flour crawling with weevils. Cans of vegetable loaf you wouldn't wish on the enemy. You light the fire. It hisses, sputters, smokes. The flames lick the air like they're hungry too. You watch quietly. Then someone sneaks a real onion into the fire, just for fun. The smell is unbearable. It reminds everyone of kitchens, and family, and all the little rooms they haven't stood in for years. One man covers his face. I can't do this, he says. You put a hand on his shoulder. It's just smoke. No, he says. It's home. The flames rise. You don't look away. Later that night, you write a letter. You tell no one. You just sit by the mess tent, tear off a sheet of ration box cardboard, and scribble out the following: if I make it out of this alive, I want 3 things: a hot meal, a warm room, and someone to talk to while I eat it. You fold the cardboard and tuck it in your jacket. Not to mail. Just to carry, because sometimes a ration isn't enough, sometimes you need a reason to open it, sometimes you need a reason to open it. Not just hunger. Hunger's always there. But a reason. A purpose. A memory. A sliver of hope that the tin contains something more than protein and salt and shelf life. The next day, you meet that reason. Her name's not important. You never even ask it. She's French, maybe 17, with dirt-streaked cheeks and the kind of expression that says she's seen tanks before birthdays. She appears at the depot's edge, clutching a basket and a baby brother. No one knows what to do. She holds up the basket. Inside, eggs. Real ones. Uncracked. Still warm. The baby cries. She speaks softly. Too soft. One of the officers scowls and waves her away. But Polanski, yes, he's here too, reassigned for a few days, steps forward. He crouches, opens his coat, and pulls out 3 chocolate bars. He trades them for the eggs without a word. No one stops him. That evening, he scrambles them in a dented skillet you swear came from the Civil War. No seasoning. No butter. Just fire and eggs and reverence. He gives you one bite, you chew with your eyes closed. The texture is unreal, fluffy, hot, imperfect. The flavor knocks the sadness out of your teeth. I remember now, you whisper. Why people cook? He nods. It's how we say, I'm still here. You save a scrap of shell in your pocket, the war presses on, indifferent. But you remember that night forever, the eggs, the girl, the chocolate, the baby crying softly against a world that refuses to be gentle, and you understand something for the first time. Food isn't just survival, it's rebellion, it's kindness, it's proof that even in the middle of ruin and ration, someone, somewhere, still believes in sweetness. You're on the move again. The orders came this morning, simple, vague, and a little too cheerful. You're being transferred to a new division further east. Closer to the fighting. Closer to the frostbitten whisper of what they're now calling the final push. The mess tent is packed and stowed. The spoons are counted. The last tin of apples is split between whoever's left. You take one bite and leave the rest behind. You don't know why. Some kind of ritual, maybe. Like leaving coins on a gravestone, your new assignment is logistic support, half transport, half inventory, and entirely surrounded by hungry men. You travel in a supply convoy. Trucks bouncing down frozen roads, wheels squealing like they're in pain, and every jolt sends powdered milk and canned beans rattling like angry bones. You sit between two crates of lard, trying not to think about how your life is now measured in calories per ounce. The cold is unforgiving. Worse than any ration. Your gloves have holes. The wind finds them. It always does. You finally arrive at a depot so temporary it doesn't have a name, just a dirt clearing beside a splintered barn. There are half shelters built out of fuel drums and stolen planks, a single wood-burning stove, and one sergeant in charge of everything edible, probably. His name is Kruger. No one calls him that. Everyone just says Sergeant Spoon. You're greeted with a handshake, a shrug, and a steaming mug of something that smells like lentils, onions, and miracle, lunch, he says. If you squint, you taste it, not bad. Not good. But warm. That's enough. This place isn't a depot. It's a way station. A pause button in the middle of too much forward. Food comes in. Food goes out. You help in the sorting tent, where soldiers dump boxes marked in half a dozen languages. Italian biscuits. Canadian corned beef. British tea. Soviet jam in tiny glass jars that glow ruby red in the sunlight. When there is sunlight, that jam becomes currency. You trade one jar for a French soldier's real cigarettes. Another for a pair of socks that aren't full of holes. One you hoard, because you can't bring yourself to open it yet, you just carry it, like sweetness in your pocket. The rations here are in better condition than what you saw at the front. But still bleak. The same old suspects, beef stew with gravy the color of wet cardboard, biscuit blocks that double as paperweights, crackers stamped 1943 like it's a date that matters anymore. You try to get creative again. You mash the crackers and mix them with milk powder and cocoa. You call it mud pie. Someone else calls it war crime on a plate. You both laugh until you choke on it. Later that night, Sergeant Spoon teaches you how to make a fake custard using egg powder and water boiled 3 times. It tastes like regret but goes down smooth. It's not about taste, he tells you, scraping the pot. It's about texture. You nod. He's not wrong, there's a rhythm to this place. Morning starts with hot water, not coffee, but hot water steeped in whatever leaves you can find. Lunch is whatever was thawed first. Dinner is soup that gets thinner each time it's reheated. Some nights, the food is so bland you joke about seasoning it with gunpowder. One guy actually does. You don't talk to him after that. Still, you have your rituals. Every Tuesday, someone reads a recipe aloud from a cookbook they found in a bombed-out house. It's always the same one, chicken à la king. No one's tasted it. No one has the ingredients. But they listen anyway. It's become a lullaby of pepper and cream, 3 tablespoons of flour, someone recites. 2 cups of milk. A whole cup of chopped mushrooms. Gasps all around, "You're lying," someone says. Nobody's that rich. Another night, a guy starts crying while chewing a stale lemon drop. You ask what's wrong. He just says, "I remembered my grandmother's kitchen." You nod. You know that kind of pain, a quirky detail. At this point in the war, some GIs began cooking in their helmets, not just boiling water, but actual cooking. Tiny stews, improvised pancakes, even sausages when they could get them. The helmets weren't ideal, metal burned too fast, and the taste of old soap never really faded, but they worked. You try it once. You fry bacon in yours, it smokes. It smells. It sizzles, it works, you feel like a god. You serve it to a private from Chicago who hasn't tasted meat since Sicily. He says, "This is better than my wedding dinner." You don't ask if he's still married, you just pass him the last crisp bit and let him close his eyes. It's during one of these meals that the air raid siren begins. You drop your plate. Everyone drops everything, you scatter. Into the barn, under crates, behind mud walls. You hear the whistle. You feel the ground move, then silence, then fire. The food depot is half gone. So is the sorting tent. You rush back out, eyes burning from smoke. You find Sergeant Spoon digging through the rubble. His arm bleeding but still steady, he pulls out a crate marked cocoa, sweetened. He laughs, "Hell can wait. We've got cocoa." You help him carry it to what's left of the stove. No mugs, no spoons, just canteens and helmets. You boil water with the few tablets you can find and stir it in, hot chocolate. At the end of the world, you hand out servings like communion. 1 helmet of sweetness per soul. It's scalding. It's too sweet. It's perfect. Men sip in silence, huddled beside a fire made from splintered supply crates. The cocoa coats your tongue like velvet and sorrow. No one speaks for a long time. Eventually, someone whispers, "Tastes like before." And for a moment, the war retreats. Historians still debate whether comfort food during World War II was luxury or necessity. Some claim it was frivolous, a distraction from strategy. Others insist it was survival in its purest form, a defense not of flesh, but of sanity. You have your answer, because the next morning, the first thing Sergeant Spoon asks is, "How much cocoa's left?" Not, "Who died?" Not, "Where are the trucks?" Just, "Can we make more?" You nod. You start boiling water. Food doesn't stop grief. But it gives you a place to set it down for a while. As the weeks pass, you find yourself keeping scraps, bits of paper with recipes. Candy wrappers. A single cinnamon stick someone smuggled from Lisbon. It's broken, old, almost scentless, but you press it to your nose every night like a prayer. You keep a tally in your notebook, every new food you try, every memory it unlocks. One entry reads, January 6th, real butter. 1 tablespoon. Smelled like sunrise. Cried a little. Another, January 11th, fresh carrot, unpeeled. Crunch equals God's percussion. Another still, January 19th, raisin. Singular. Unverified. Might have been a bug. Delicious either way, you stop caring what's real. You just want taste. One day, a new shipment arrives, Italian rations. Tiny cans of risotto, tomato paste, olives soaked in oil. Someone weeps. Someone else proposes marriage to the box. That night's meal is strange, salty, delicious. the olives taste like grease and joy, you crush one into your mouth and chew slowly. You don't rush it. You let it linger, every bite is a rebellion against forgetting, you're transferred again, eventually, new roads. New mud. New uniforms, but you keep that last can of olives. Tucked away. Untouched, because someday, when this is all over, you'll open it, you'll sit at a table, with a plate. With cutlery. With someone who loves you, maybe, and you'll eat them slowly, one olive at a time, like you're remembering something sacred, because you'll eat them slowly. One olive at a time. Like you're remembering something sacred, because you'll remember the firelight flickering on tin walls. The taste of salt when everything else was gray. The way men huddled around heat not just for warmth, but for the illusion of safety. You'll remember trading half your biscuit for a pinch of sugar, not because you liked sweet things, though you do, but because the guy who had the sugar hadn't smiled in 3 days, and when he mixed it into his black sludge of coffee, he did. You'll remember that, you'll remember the soldier who carried a tin of peaches for 2 months, untouched, just to have something to look forward to. He opened it one night in silence, passed a slice to everyone, then buried the tin like it was a time capsule. You'll remember how long you chewed that peach, you'll remember how some nights, the stories were richer than the food. How someone described their mom's chicken stew so vividly that your stomach growled even while eating canned meat. How someone recited their uncle's chili recipe with so much flair it could have won ribbons, despite the fact it was probably made up on the spot. You'll remember all of it, because war teaches you how much a meal can matter. How a boiled potato can feel like hope, how a square of chocolate can feel like forgiveness, and how a jar of olives, saved, carried, and finally opened in a time of peace, can taste like the world remembering itself again. The war isn't over yet. But you can feel it tilting, like the last few minutes of a storm, the wind still wild, the sky still heavy, but something in the pressure changes. Even the food tastes different now. Not better, not fresher. Just less desperate. You're at another post, temporary, anonymous, half-constructed like all the others. But this one's bigger, busier, less haunted. Trucks roll in faster than you can unpack them. They bring crates marked in 5 languages and sealed with rusted nails, some with fresh dents from God knows what battle. You swear one tin smells like cordite before you even open it. This depot doesn't have a name either. You just call it the stomach. Because everything passes through here, food, people, rumors. You're now part of the intake team, the group that assesses rations before they get distributed. It's not glamorous work. You spend most of your time elbow deep in boxes filled with powdered eggs and meat, product of Argentina, probably. But you're good at it. You've learned to sniff out bad tins before they hiss. You know the difference between real coffee and something pretending to be coffee. And you've developed a sixth sense for jam, the good kind, the kind that wasn't cut with glucose or shame. There's more food now. Not enough to call it abundant. But enough that you don't have to water down the stew every night. Enough that guys start asking if there's ketchup. Enough that someone starts baking, yes. Baking, you blink the first time you smell it. Bread. Actual bread. Not trench biscuits. Not loaves that crumble like ancient fossils. Bread, you follow your nose to a field kitchen on the far end of the camp, where an American with forearms like tree trunks is mixing dough in a helmet. He's grinning. His apron used to be a curtain. Want in? He asks, you nod faster than you've ever nodded in your life. His name's Darnell. Grew up in Tennessee, ran a diner before the war. I'm a pie man, he tells you. But bread's what we got. He's managed to scrounge yeast from a Red Cross drop and flour from a Canadian shipment. Water's still a gamble, but you're past caring. You help him shape the loaves. You take your time. You press your fingers into the dough like it owes you something. He watches you for a second, then says, you ever think we'll make food after this? You look up. Like, for fun. Yeah. You think about that for a long time, because it's easy to forget food used to be joyful. Later that week, a letter arrives from back home. It's not for you. But someone reads it aloud anyway. It's from a mother in Wisconsin, addressed to her son, who probably hasn't seen a mailbox in 6 months. She writes about grocery shopping. It sounds ridiculous. I found sugar for 19 cents a pound, she writes. And your father insists on real butter now, even though the margarine's cheaper. I told him, not during a war. Everyone laughs. It's the kind of laugh that aches in your ribs. Sugar. Butter. Arguing over prices, luxury, one of the Canadian sighs. You ever just miss eating slow? You nod. You all do. The depot receives an unusual delivery, a collection of small wooden crates marked holiday issue, do not open early. Naturally, you open one immediately. Inside, fruitcake, dozens of them. Dense, dark, soaked in syrup, and wrapped in wax paper that smells faintly of pine. Each one comes with a typed note from some baking committee back home. Merry Christmas from the Women's League of Nebraska. You've never been to Nebraska. You don't even know what's in Nebraska, but you bite into the fruitcake and immediately forgive the entire state. It's awful, but it's sweet, and someone baked it. You pass the slices around. Some guys pretend to hate it. Others scarf it down like they've been starving for sentiment. You eat yours slowly. Carefully. The candied fruit clings to your molars and pulls something warm from your chest you didn't expect. You find yourself whispering, Merry Christmas, under your breath, even though it's March. One day, you're called to inventory a batch of rations marked for liberation zones only. You open them, and suddenly, it hits you, these aren't for you, these are for them, the civilians. The ones who didn't fight but still starved. The ones who lived under rubble and fear and hunger so sharp it made your tin Spam look like caviar. These boxes contain strange luxuries, rice, dried fruit, flour, even chocolate, not wrapped in waxed paper, but in glossy foil with colored bands. You pick up a tin of condensed milk and just stare. You think of the girl in France. The eggs. The baby. The basket. You remember the cocoa during the air raid. You think, they deserve this more than we do. You inventory everything slowly. Meticulously. Like each item is fragile, because they are. Later that week, you help distribute those same rations to a nearby town. The people are cautious. Starvation makes you suspicious. But when the children see the bread, something changes. They run forward. One tiny hand grabs yours. You reach into your pack and pull out a single packet of jam. The ruby red kind. You kneel down and offer it like a gift. The child's eyes go wide. He says something you don't understand. You smile anyway. You don't need to understand. You just need to feed him. A quirky fact, some U.S. field kitchens baked birthday cakes for units approaching demobilization. They'd use cocoa powder, biscuit crumbs, and melted margarine to shape something vaguely cake-like. Frosting was made from powdered sugar and instant coffee. Candles. Canteen caps. You bake one with darnel before the division redeploys. It's hideous. Lopsided. Burned on the edges, but when the men see it, they cheer like they've won the war. One guy starts singing happy birthday, even though no one knows whose birthday it is. Someone cries into their slice. You just eat yours slowly, eyes closed. It's bitter. Too bitter, but it tastes like an ending. Historians still argue whether food shaped morale more than leadership, or whether it was the little moments, like baking with a friend or opening a mystery tin, that gave men the will to keep going. There's no consensus, but you know what it felt like. It felt like each bite was a reminder, you're still here, and then it comes, the announcement, whispers at first. Then shouting. Then singing, the war is ending. You don't believe it at first. How could you? You've eaten too many lies in too many forms. But this one, This one tastes different, everyone reacts differently. Some cheer. Some collapse. Some sit quietly and stare at their empty plates. Unsure what to do with relief, you find Darnell. Time to go home, he says. You nod, then ask, do you think we'll ever make toast again? He laughs. Every damn morning. You shake on it. That night, there's a celebration, chaotic, strange, beautiful. Cans of fruit are passed around like trophies. Someone finds a crate of liquor. Someone else roasts sausages over an open flame until they're blackened and perfect. Darnell bakes one last loaf of bread. You eat it with butter from a ration tin. It's the best thing you've ever tasted, and not just because of the bread, but because you know, for the first time in years, that it won't be the last. You go to sleep that night with a full belly and no helmet. Just a real pillow, and one last can of jam in your coat pocket. You don't open it. You'll save it. For peace, you'll save it. For peace, because peace is a flavor too. It doesn't come all at once, not in a parade or trumpet blast. It arrives in small, careful portions. Like a bowl of soup with more vegetables than water. Like butter that's yellow instead of gray. Like jam in your pocket you don't need to hide. In the days that follow, you see it everywhere, in how the kitchen line gets a little less frantic. How the guard at the depot hums a tune instead of barking orders, how someone leaves a pot of stew simmering on the fire, unattended, because they trust no one will steal it. Not now. Not tonight. You find yourself savoring the quiet as much as the food. The last breakfast you share with Darnell is simple, eggs from a liberated farm, toast browned perfectly over coals, and strong coffee that no longer tastes like desperation. You both eat slowly, no rush, no orders, no more breathing down your neck. He finishes first, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and says, you know what I think. You raise an eyebrow. I think someday, he says, we're gonna open restaurants. Real ones. No powdered eggs. No ration tins. Real butter. Real jam. And toast so good, people cry when it crunches. You chuckle, I'd eat that, you say, damn right you would, he grins, and just like that, it's decided, not a pact, not a plan, just the quiet birth of a dream, not for glory, not for medals, just for food, for peace, for a chance to sit down and eat like humans again. No war, no ration books, no jam hoarded in pockets, just breakfast, the way it was always meant to be. Peace, as it turns out, is a strange meal. It doesn't taste how you thought it would. You imagine sweetness, richness, a full spread. But when it finally arrives, it's more like leftovers after a long party, warm in places, cold in others, and full of silences no one quite knows how to season. You're back home, sort of, at least, it looks like home. The streets are still there, though they seem narrower. The sky is still gray, though it feels taller. The grocery stores are open, and the shelves are mostly full. You see children laughing as they chase each other past a butcher's shop. You stand still and stare at a loaf of bread in a bakery window for too long. It feels obscene, how soft it is. How golden the crust, how plentiful it all seems. You've been demobilized for a week now. Your papers are signed. Your uniforms packed away. Your duffel bag still smells faintly of old tinned meat and the ghost of smoke. You haven't touched the jam jar. It's still in your coat pocket, unopened, as promised. Your first official meal back is at a small diner. The kind with vinyl booths and syrup stuck to the table corners. You order eggs, toast, bacon, coffee. You expect fireworks. What you get is silence. It's good. It's fine. The coffee is strong. The bacon is real. The toast is toasted. But you can't help but feel like you're missing something. Something that can't be served on a plate. You poke at the yolk and realize, it's not the food you missed, it's the meaning behind it. You spend the first few weeks pretending to be hungry, You try everything: cherry pie, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, roast beef sandwiches so thick they could smother a man. You chew. You swallow. You nod politely when people ask if you're glad to be back, but something inside your gut doesn't know how to come home. You walk past a farmer's market and stare at the fresh tomatoes. You hold one up to your nose, inhale deeply, and for just a second, the war disappears. You remember the tin of Italian rations. The olives. The sweet, acidic pop of something that wasn't gray. You buy a handful of tomatoes. Just because, you slice one open in your kitchen, sprinkle it with salt, and eat it over the sink like it's a confession. The juice drips onto your shirt. You don't wipe it away. Your nights are restless. Sleep doesn't come easy. You find yourself pacing your kitchen at 2 a.m., opening and closing the pantry. Not because you're hungry, but because you miss the ritual, the planning, the foraging, the sacred math of turning not enough into just enough. One night, you finally crack and reach for the jam. You sit at the table. You peel back the metal lid. The scent hits you like a memory: summer. Warmth. Fruit that wasn't rationed. You don't have any toast, so you eat it with a spoon, one slow bite at a time. You cry, quietly. Not because you're sad. Not even because of the war, but because it finally tastes like peace. Weeks pass. You begin to cook again. Not for survival. Not for necessity, for pleasure. You go to the grocery store and marvel at the absurdity of choice. Dozens of spices. Fresh herbs. 3 types of pasta. You nearly collapse in front of the butter section. So much gold, chilled behind glass. You take your time walking home. You plan a meal. It's simple: just roasted potatoes with garlic, rosemary, and a pat of that miraculous butter. But when you plate it up, when you sit down, when you eat it with a real fork off a real ceramic dish, you feel your hands stop shaking. You finish every bite, then you write it down. Recipe number 1: piece potatoes, 3 medium reds, sliced thin, 1 sprig rosemary, 1 clove garlic, smashed, 1 pat butter, the good kind, salt, not tears. Bake until the kitchen feels like home. You start keeping that notebook again. You title it Meals Worth Remembering. You fill it with food that makes you feel. A peanut butter sandwich that tastes like Sunday afternoons. An orange that takes you back to the French girl's basket. Oatmeal that somehow doesn't make you hate yourself. You invite your neighbor over one night for stew. He's quiet, older, kind. Lost a brother in the Pacific. You both pretend you're fine. He takes one bite and says, "Tastes like my wife used to make." You nod. You don't say anything. You just pass the salt. You volunteer at a veterans shelter once a week. You chop vegetables. You stir giant pots of chili. You sneak extra ladles to the guys who look like they haven't tasted kindness in a while. One man says, "This ain't food, it's a second chance." You laugh. I'll take that review. Food becomes your language again. Not just what's on the plate, but what it says. You're welcome, you matter, you made it, you're not alone. A quirky fact: after World War II, many soldiers went into the culinary arts. They opened restaurants, became bakers, invented dishes with names like Victory Casserole and GI Gravy. Some even marketed cookbooks based on field recipes, adjusted, of course, to include actual flavor. You read one of those cookbooks once. The margins are filled with scribbles: "Too salty. Add paprika. Just like my sergeant used to make." You smile at every correction. You decide to start writing your own, not just for yourself, but for everyone who forgot how good food could feel. For the kid who thinks toast is boring. For the old man who still smells stew when it rains. For the woman in Nebraska who baked fruitcakes for strangers halfway across the world. You call it the ration reimagined. Historians still argue whether soldiers ever truly adjusted to peacetime food. Some say it never tastes the same. Others believe the transition is part of the healing. You don't know which is true. but one afternoon, you bite into a grilled cheese sandwich with pickles on the side, and you think, this is enough. That night, you dream of jam. But this time, it's spread across thick slices of sourdough, still warm from the oven. You're not in uniform, you're in pajamas. There's jazz on the radio and a cat curled at your feet. You wake up smiling, because even dreams remember. One last story. You're at a local event, some Veterans Day thing, mostly speeches and lukewarm coffee. There's a table of cookies, sandwiches, juice boxes. You're chatting with a teen who's interviewing veterans for a school project. He asks, "What's the best thing you ever ate during the war?" You pause, then you say, "A scrambled egg." He blinks. "Just one egg?" "Yeah," you smile. But it was the first egg I'd seen in 6 months. The fire was weak. No seasoning. Cooked in a pan that had seen better wars. He's quiet, you add, sometimes food isn't about flavor. It's about what it reminds you you still have. The teen scribbles something. Then offers you a juice box. You take it, you sip, it's too sweet, but you drink the whole thing, because peace, after all, is a strange meal, and you're still learning how to finish it. It's too sweet, but you drink the whole thing, because peace, after all, is a strange meal, and you're still learning how to finish it. You walk home from the event with that little cardboard juice box in your coat pocket, empty but oddly comforting. The straws still poked through the top, bent like a salute. You keep it, for some reason. You place it on the kitchen counter next to the last jam jar, now cleaned, polished, and holding a single sprig of rosemary. You realize you've built a small altar, to memory, to survival, to food that fed your body and the version of yourself you had to protect during the worst years of your life. You light a candle, not for mourning, but for warmth. Then you crack 2 eggs into a hot pan. The butter hisses. The kitchen fills with that perfect smell, rich, golden, slightly nutty. You sprinkle in salt. A little pepper. Nothing fancy. You slide the eggs onto a plate, and for the first time in a long time, you sit down to breakfast without ghosts at the table. No helmet, no rush, no fear that it might be your last, just food, just you, just the quiet clink of a fork against porcelain, and a breeze through the window that doesn't carry smoke or sirens, just birdsong and a whisper of rosemary. You close your eyes after the last bite, you breathe in slowly, and finally, you are full. There's something funny about leftovers. You used to hate them. Cold potatoes, sad gravy, stew that had been reheated one too many times. In the war, leftovers meant less, meant someone forgot to eat or someone didn't come back for their share. But now, you look at your little Tupperware container of last night's roast chicken and you think, this is proof I have enough. Proof you can afford to save something. Proof you made it. You've become the sort of person who writes grocery lists in pencil, keeps a drawer full of rubber bands and twist ties, and can't throw away the heel of a loaf without wincing. You still save butter wrappers for greasing pans. You catch yourself rationing coffee grounds, even though the tin is full and the store is just down the road. You're not stingy. You're just seasoned. You've earned the right to treasure food. It's been months now. The war is over. Properly over. Not just on paper or in parades. It's faded into sepia like an old newspaper clipping. People have moved on. Some have moved far away. Some, you don't talk to anymore, not out of bitterness, just distance. Life stretches. Life mends. You've built a little life of your own. It's not dramatic. Not the stuff of books. But it's warm. Reliable. There's a garden in your backyard now. Tomatoes. Basil. Some potatoes. And one stubborn line of carrots that refuses to sprout straight. You spend early mornings out there, dirt under your nails, sun on your neck, and an old radio humming swing music into the soil. Your neighbor, the one who once wept into your stew, brings over sourdough starters like a peace offering. It's been alive since '46, he tells you. You nod like you're meeting a veteran. Because in a way, you feed it every day, flour. Water. Patience, it bubbles like it remembers. Some days, you teach cooking classes at the community center, not the fancy stuff. Not soufflés or sushi, just the basics: how to stretch a meal, how to listen to the garlic, how to make soup when the fridge feels empty. You teach them how to crack an egg one-handed, how to smell the difference between paprika and cayenne, how to toast breadcrumbs in butter for crunch. You tell stories. 2. Like the time someone used toothpaste as icing, or the soldier who swore powdered eggs were nature's betrayal. The students laugh. They don't know what it's like to boil water over firewood in a helmet. And you're glad. But you teach them anyway, because even peace has its own battles, and a well-fed person fights better. Sometimes, you wonder about the others: Darnell, the bread man; Sergeant Spoon with his bleeding arm and Coco; the French girl with her basket; the child who said thank you in a language you never learned. You wonder where they are now. You hope they're eating well. You hope they're feeding others. You imagine Darnell running a roadside diner in Tennessee with biscuits the size of fists and a sign out front that says, "Toast like the war never happened." You imagine Spoon teaching his grandkids to stir without scorching, yelling, "Texture matters." Like it's gospel. You imagine the French girl grown now, maybe with kids of her own, packing eggs into a basket just like before, this time without fear. You even imagine that tiny boy, now taller, now older, spooning jam onto toast with the same reverence you once did. It's comforting to know that the food you shared went on, even if you never saw it happen. The world is louder now. Cars beep. Telephones ring. Stores glow with neon. There are brands you've never heard of, ingredients you couldn't have imagined back then. Greek yogurt. Sushi to go. Burgers taller than your coffee cup, and still, sometimes, you crave hardtack, just a little, just a nibble, not because it's good. It's not. But because it reminds you of what it meant to get through something. You keep a box in your pantry. For memory's sake. It's probably stale. It was always stale, but it's yours. One afternoon, a kid in your class asks the big one, did food actually matter during the war? You pause. The room gets quiet, then you say, more than anything. Because it did, because in the worst moments, food wasn't just fuel. It was comfort. Connection. Continuity. It was the taste of before, and the promise of after. You tell them, there were days we fought over a single onion. Days a cup of coffee felt like salvation. Days we risked everything just to fry a slice of bacon in a helmet. They laugh, you smile, then you pass around your homemade jam. No ration stamps required. A quirky fact: after the war, companies used their leftover military rations to develop convenience foods. Instant noodles, freeze-dried coffee, powdered drinks, all born out of necessity. Now they sit on supermarket shelves like artifacts of survival repackaged as convenience. You walk past them in the store sometimes and can't help but chuckle. You think, you have no idea what that stuff used to mean. Still, you grab a pack or two, because some memories come in foil, and taste like victory. You decide to throw a dinner party, just once, just to prove you can. It's nothing fancy, just a table full of people who've meant something to you, and a menu that's part memory, part healing. There's soup, of course. And real bread. And something sweet at the end. You serve everything in mismatched bowls, because uniformity was never the point. You light candles, not for romance, but for reverence. You pass dishes around with both hands. Someone asks what the spice is in the stew. You say, it's peace. They laugh. But you mean it, because peace, like stew, takes time, and you're finally ready to savor it. As the night winds down, someone offers to wash dishes. Someone else starts playing a record. And you sit, your plate empty, your heart full, thinking, this is the meal I was always waiting for. No rationing, no orders, no war, just dinner, and people, and tomorrow, historians still argue whether food was the glue or the gauze of wartime life. Whether it kept soldiers sane or merely kept them standing. Whether it preserved identity or masked desperation. But you don't argue anymore, you just keep cooking, because some questions don't need answers, they just need recipes. Later that week, you visit the cemetery, there's no one specific you're seeing. Just names. Just silence. Just gravestones lined like soldiers still at attention. You leave behind a small, wrapped biscuit and a folded napkin with a handwritten note, still cooking. Still grateful. Still remembering. And you walk home, not because you've forgotten, but because you're full. The dishes are done now. The lights are low. There's the soft clink of silverware being put away, the hush of the stove cooling down, and a long, slow exhale that says, "We made it, outside." The world keeps turning, quietly, patiently. Maybe there's a breeze slipping through the cracked window, tugging gently at the curtains. Maybe you hear the muffled chirp of crickets, or the low hum of a fridge that's no longer a miracle box, but once might have been. You're not hungry anymore. Not in the way that gnaws. Not in the way that aches. What's left now is something smaller, softer. A little craving for stillness. For that moment between the last bite and the first dream, where your body remembers safety, and your mind lets go of counting calories, counting rations, counting miles. Maybe you think of a soldier you never met, sitting in the dark with a spoonful of jam and no toast. Maybe you picture a mess tent on the edge of nowhere, the smell of cocoa in the air, the sound of boots on dirt, and the warmth of something shared. Or maybe you just feel your own heartbeat slowing, steady, fed. This is your last bite of the story. Let it settle, let it nourish the parts of you still healing from things you can't name. And as you drift, maybe you'll dream not of war or hunger, but of a kitchen filled with light. A pan sizzling gently. Someone humming. Bread rising, and peace, served warm. Good night. Sweet dreams.